The story begins with who would have thought that the usually flora and fauna researcher Line Minyu would become a rain goddess because of one accident. There was a voice. Got her. The one chosen by fate. In the end, Lin was contacted by the magic system. In other words, it saved her. Yes, she was the one who saved her. She is now her magic system. However, to earn her return to her home world, Lina will have to become a rain goddess in another world. However, that in order to make it rain, she needed to kiss him, wondered Lina. Under the power of his beauty. Now you're going to have to do it if you want it back. Besides, look how handsome he is. He even has the lion ears she likes so much. She won't lose anything from this kiss, the magic system told her. Lin started looking for fancy ways to kiss him. Like she's a laney and let's play kissing games. What she didn't realize, however, was that it would spill over into something more. She only saw him as a friend, yet he had decided that Lin was now his wife. Manfei is only his youngest, and Line is his female. And how could she resist such a cute little lion cub, Linnae thought. Wait a minute, others started courting her too, didn't they? Lina would make them ardent desires. But now, from the beginning, and in order. The laboratory where experiments are conducted, a girl stands in front of a large aquarium with water and writes something. This is an experimental organism, a C2 of a new species, which after 2 years of work by recombination of genes was bred by our research group. Our main character's name is Line Minyu, a researcher at the Izuyuan Zoology Research Institute. The girl looks into the aquarium and says, "It is still in the incubation stage for now. There's some creature lying in an aquarium, and the girl is waiting for something to happen to it. I think it was just starting to happen. The shell was beginning to open. He'll be here soon," Lina said. Sometimes she wouldn't have thought she could witness history because of her lessons. "We need to get a picture of everything soon and send it to the work chat room," she told Lina. S2 looks fascinating. It looks a bit like sea wax, and its body looks like a jellyfish, and his tentacles glow. "What's going on in the aquarium? The electricity is flowing!" Leanne shrieked in surprise. The girl immediately rushed to the outlet to unplug the aquarium. Need to unplug and move it to another tank, she thought. Can't put C2 in danger, or they'll lose the results of years of work. The girl reached into the aquarium to retrieve the creature with a net. And just like at the beginning of our story, we're repeating ourselves. There was a voice. "I've got her, the one who was chosen by fate." The monster grabbed Linai and carried her away. The girl thought she was in pain. What a shame, so she's dead. But in her stupefaction she saw a flask of water and heard the words, "Drink some water." She thought, is that S2 water? And she kept yelling, "Don't eat it!" And she threw back the water dish. She was answered to this. "Don't spill water like that if you're not thirsty. It's very precious here." When she opened her eyes, she saw a guy in front of her. His ears were like an animal's, soft and fluffy. Jialan, the Lion King, head of the Western Malia tribe. Liane, when she saw it, started mumbling, Well, I'm sorry I attacked you." She was really scared because she had been attacked by a S2 and almost drowned. "Thank you for saving her." "Oh yeah, what's up with S2? Is everything all right?" "And the starving rabbit is your species or something. What tribe are you from?" the lad asked. But he thought to himself, what a strange species. He'd never heard of one before. He must find out who she was. Explanation for starving rabbit, they have it consonant with like S2. Linnae asked her tribe's appearance, surprised, couldn't figure out what he wanted from her. When she looked around, she saw that they were in the desert, and not in her lab where she had been just a few minutes ago. The girl asked why we were in the desert. She had just been in the lab. The guy leaned over to her and asked Xianshi, "Is this your tribe again?" Clarification in this guy's language lab is consonant with Xianshi. He thought again he had never heard of such a tribe. She is definitely not from his tribe. "Malia, where are your males? Why did they leave you in the middle of the dangerous desert?" he asked. Linnae looked at him and thought tribe males he was using some strange words. "Wait a minute," she said. "Those are lion ears." She noticed this guy had fluffy, soft ears on his head. "What cute ears, are you a cosplayer?" "Yes," she asked and started touching those ears. "Oh, it's just like a real one." But it doesn't seem to hurt him at all, she thought. Apparently, because she was attacked by S2, she started hallucinating. Now she sees this man with her favorite lion's ears. But obviously the guy didn't like it. So he grabbed her hand and pulled it away from his ears. It was kind of rough. "Insolent female, how dare you touch his ears? Don't you know that this is a forbidden area of the king?" shouted he. While he was yelling at her, Lena noticed that he had more than just fluffy ears. Oh, and the tail is also a forbidden zone. What a touch, such a real touch. As if everything is real before she never had the opportunity to touch the lion to enjoy at least in a dream, thought the girl, and began to feel his soft, fluffy tail. The guy didn't realize she was trying to woo him. First the ear oil, now the tail. He got a little angry, grabbed his arrow and threatened Lena, pointed the arrow at her neck. She screamed, "What are you doing?" And the guy asks, "What tribe are you from? What are you up to?" And then Lene realized that the pain was real, and even blood was already starting to seep from his island of a tip. "I think she's moved somewhere," the girl thought, "and now she's in danger." They continued to be in this position. And what do I do now? She of course escaped death, but was transported to some unknown time. That's how those words were deciphered in the beginning. She is the one chosen by fate. She thought it was the same voice as S2's when he pulled her into the aquarium. Some strange creature appeared in a cloud, a small one with wings. The creature said it was her system, White Dadan. "White, aren't you yellow?" The girl asked why she came out of nowhere. She started pointing her finger and says, "To this guy, hurry up, look around." The girl in yellow appeared right out of thin air. "She's a lot more suspicious than him, so you better question that creature." But the guy didn't even move, he's like frozen and staring at her. Lean asks, "Why are you frozen, or have you decided to let her go?" While the guy froze, either couldn't get his arrow away from her neck. "So she was the one who saved her?" Line asked. "Yes, it was I who saved you. She is your system and golden instrument, and don't call her yellow, she's white." "The gold instrument system, what are you talking about?" Line asked. "And why did you move her to such a strange place?" The creature began to reply. "To put it simply, you are already dead in your world. You died in an accident related to my pending mutation of a new species. But you are lucky. Our system chose you, made you a daughter of the desert world, and endowed you with the rain skill. After completing the Oasis mission in this world, you can be reborn in your own world." Line got upset, shouting, "So she died without even getting glory for creating S2. She studied hard for so many years and even managed to get a job at a research institute. She was so busy that she never even once fell in love or tasted a king crab. And after all that, she just died." The girl was clearly upset, and said with great anger that she would definitely return to her world to take advantage of all this. "What were you saying about the Oasis mission and the rain skill?" The creature began to narrate. "There are 4 main tribes in this world. The Western Jia tribe, the Eastern Dika tribe, the Northern Linhong tribe, and the Southern Jun tribe. When you obtain the 4 treasures of these tribes, you will be able to combine their power and become a water goddess. Then you will have the power to turn the desert into an oasis world. As for the rain skill, kiss him and you'll understand." The creature pointed at that guy with the ears. Lean shouted, "Are you kidding me or something? I just met him. Plus he tried to kill her a minute ago, and you want me to kiss him? You'll have to do it if you want to go back. Besides, look how handsome he is. He even has those lion ears you like so much. You won't lose anything from this kiss," the creature said. But he was ready to kill her from one touch. If she kissed him, he'd kill her for sure, Lena said. "Don't worry. She promises no one will hurt her. What's more, they'll even start thanking you," and started shoving her towards this guy. And then this creature unfroze this guy with its magic action, and he opened his eyes and saw that he was kissing our heroine. He thought to himself, how come he had captured this female? How could she get so close to him so quickly? And then it all came true. As the creature said, it rained. "It's raining," Lena said. "It's pouring rain." Just then, a sign appeared in a pop-up window that said, "Congratulations, you've gotten the kiss achievement and mastered the rain skill." "Rain, how great is that? It's actually raining," said this guy. He was very happy about the rain. Lene herself was surprised at how happy he was about this rain. She hadn't expected such a reaction from him. "You know, it hasn't rained in our tribe's territory for a long time. You are a goddess sent to them by the heavens." He grabbed Lina in his arms and began to twirl with joy. "Oh, let me go!" she shouted. So this is what the system was talking about when it assured her that no one would hurt her, and even praise her, thought the girl. There's nothing to worry about. As long as there's a lot of water vapor here, it will rise up in the air current and start to balance out, forming clouds. When enough condensation builds up, It starts to rain, said Lean. He didn't know what she was talking about, but he couldn't stop admiring her and couldn't take his eyes off her. She really is a goddess, he thought. It didn't take long for them to rejoice. In an instant, a sharp claw appeared. The boy cried out cautiously, but the length had no time to group itself, and it was the claw that seized her. What a luscious female, he'd love to have her, said Sokka, the name of the scorpion's boyfriend. How painful it is. She just calmed down the lion and then the scorpion appeared. But it's a good thing the lion had spears. He could hit the claw of that scorpion creature with one of his spears. The claw released Lena from its chains. Lan's boyfriend grabbed Lena in his arms and ran with her. He ran up to this scorpion and said Sokka is his female. The ever-lonely Lan has a female, said Sokka Scorpion. Because of the patriarchy of your tribe, you can enjoy so many women. Maybe we can try this female together, said Sokka. But Lena wrapped her arms around the guy even tighter. And don't dream of it, replied Lan threateningly with his spear, which sent sparks with the spears. All those spears flew at the guy's scorpion, dozens of them. But Sokka said that he here was sure that Lan would change his mind soon. Just give him this female, and that's it, he said. Lan's boyfriend put her on the ground and said, Stay here and don't go anywhere. He'll be back soon. Yes, okay, replied Linai. And then the fight started. The guy turned into a lion king, a huge red lion. What, he decided to fight seriously over this female? Well, he'll take the fight then too, Sokka Scorpion said. And then a fight broke out. Scorpion Boy turned into a scorpion, and our Lion King turned into a lion. They've changed their shape, Linai said. What kind of world is this that you can change your appearance? While the guys were figuring out among themselves who was stronger, more important, then Linai wondered if she should run away from them after all. She almost forgot. She's in a world she doesn't even know. If she ran away, she was bound to run into some strange beast. At least this lion no longer fears her and even seems to protect her. The best solution in this situation would be to use this lion as a shield and slowly accomplish the system's missions, Lean thought. Then she would have to gain his trust. She wondered how she would do that, and shoved her hands in her pockets in the habit of a lab technician. Oh, what's that in your pocket? The girl fumbled for some sort of object. As it turns out, she has a flashlight in her pocket. Scorpions are nocturnal, so they are very sensitive to bright light. She had no idea that her favorite flashlight would go with her. When Linai shined the flashlight on him, Sokka shouted, What is that? Why is it so bright? Stop it! This huge scorpion escaped from the bright light. But as it turned out, he only made a circle to accelerate and attack Lena. He ran after her from behind and shouted, Damn it! The female hates bright lights! He'll eat her alive! And then our lion guy came sneaking up from the side and bit him on the claw. The lion guy turned back into a man and took our heroine in his arms, asking, Are you okay? The girl noticed that the big scorpion was dead. Finally, this beast was so dangerous. However, the lion tore it into small pieces. In this world, power decides everything. Here, the weak are victimized by the strong, Linai thought. Whether from fatigue or from the fact that she had traveled between worlds, Linai lost consciousness. For some reason, it seemed to her that this lion had attacked her. She screamed, No, don't eat it! But she was in the lion boy's arms at that moment, and he couldn't understand what was wrong with her. Wake up, he was telling her. The western district of the Malia tribe. I wonder what happened to Jialan. It's taking him so long to return. Manfei, daughter of a former tribal chief. When she looked out for him, she finally saw him walking in the distance across the desert. And he's finally back, she said. I noticed he was carrying someone, some woman. And why is she in Jialan's arms? At the same time in the tribe, the children run down the street and shout that they have heard that the elder brother has returned, not only with water, but also with a beautiful sister. Where is she? Shouts the second child. He wants to see her too. The children ran up to the priestess's house and said she was there. He didn't find a water source today, but he collected rainwater, holding out several water tanks. Manfei, can you distribute water to everyone? Yes, all right, the girl replied. Jialan, who is this girl you brought? Why did you pick her up? The children were already crowding around the entrance to the dwelling to see the newcomer. When they saw her, they began to say how beautiful she was, and what tribe they were from. And another boy said, What good is her beauty? He doesn't think that with such a frail body she will be able to work long. And the girl noticed that she had some unusual dress. She'd never seen one like it before. She was attacked by Sokka in the desert, and she lost consciousness. That's why he brought her here, the boy said. Jialan, you are so kind, said Manfei. But our water supply is barely enough for the needs of the people of our tribe. They can't take in one more person. But the girl herself thought that she should definitely banish this stranger because Jialan was hers. At the same time, he has a strong suspicion that it is a female rain goddess sent by the heavens. After meeting her, the sky, which had been so clear, was suddenly covered with dark clouds, and then it began to rain. This is the rainwater he brought. Well, as always, when the kids heard, it started, "What is this goddess? Does she really have the power to make it rain?" "Writing without leaving, our tribes," the grown women said. "A goddess? That's impossible. She doesn't look like a goddess after all," said Manfei. "They'll know if she's a goddess when the priestess gets here," the boy said. And just as he spoke, a woman came in immediately saying, "Why is it so lively here today?" She had a staff with a blue ball on it. "This is the Mosi woman, the priestess of the Malia tribe." "Priestess, you came." Everyone started admiring and saying, "You are very timely, priestess. Please use your stone to see if this girl is a goddess or not." The priestess averted her eyes with a question. "Goddess, let's check it out now." And she began to conjure, and she turned to her gods and she said, "Orb of the light of the gods, give her strength. Show her the fate of this girl." And the ball began to shine very brightly with sparks of all kinds. Then at some point one of the girls shouted, "Priestess, your stone has fallen to the ground. It means that this girl does not possess divine powers." That was exactly what the priestess said. The stone did not detect divine power in her. But there was something wrong here. Even if there was no divine power in it, the stone shouldn't have reacted like this. The woman picked up the stone, and at that moment it started raining outside. Everyone started yelling, "Yay, rain, a real goddess!" The priestess thought it was the future foretold by the magic stone. So this is the future this girl will bring them. An excerpt of what the priestess saw. So this is the rain-blessed city of Malia. This is the land where our time must live. Get them out of here. Brother Linhei, Jialan, since this girl has no divine powers, we will escort her out of here. When she wakes up, we don't have extra water for her, said Manfei, but the priestess stopped them. Wait, she said. Though she has no divine power, she can greatly affect the future of their tribe. But great fortune and misfortune go hand in hand. It can be a good opportunity, but it can turn into a curse. It must be weighed carefully. Then let's have a vote. Let everyone choose for themselves whether to keep it or not, said Manfei. And then everyone would start shrieking. The girls who were with Manfei would shout that they were against the girl staying, and the guys who were in favor of Jialan, they, on the contrary, said that they agreed, and this new girl was staying. It's so noisy in here, and some girls are yelling too, she said to Lena, waking up. Line, Jialan shouted. She's his female, and none of you will lay a finger on her, since the priestess said she could help our tribe. He's keeping her, and will resolve any trouble she brings. Linne heard him say that she was his female. Why was this guy starting to say such strange things again? And only Manfei was very displeased. She clenched her fists in anger, and thought that this unknown girl had to leave their tribe. Jialan's female can only be her. Evening came when already Linky had come to her senses. Then Jialan decided to show her where she would live. This is his abode now. Now she would live with him. And Lian asked where she would sleep. Jialan poked his finger at a large block of stone, flat, and said, Over there. Line, she asked. What about you? Where do you sleep? Line said, You are my female. Naturally, he will sleep with you. Lin shouted, What? You're going to sleep with her? You can't do that. We've known each other for the first day. She can't do that. She's not that kind of girl. Besides, another girl seems to like you a lot, Faye. She won't be thrilled if she finds out we're sleeping together. All the more reason for Lena to just imagine what could happen. Lions, after all, are very strong and have endless attraction. If he gets it in his head, she certainly won't be able to avoid it. Wait, what is she even thinking about right now? This is not the time for such thoughts. Gotta pull herself together. She's unshakable, an unbreakable fortress. Jialan walked over and hugged her, saying that Manfei was only his youngest, and Linghe was the older female. He had shot a boar this morning, so now they would eat. He drew his sword and began to cut down the boar. After cutting off one of its legs, he said, Here's a boar's leg. Is that enough for you? Asked the girl. With that paw in her hand, she wondered how she could eat it. Jialan immediately showed her how to eat it by biting off a piece of meat from that leg. He began to chew and said, "How else can you eat meat? You just take a bite and swallow it." Lena felt sick to her stomach and started vomiting from what she saw. She understands that it will be raw meat, but he's in human form now. So this world still hasn't learned how to use fire, she thought. The guy asked if you're not feeling well. If so, he can take her to Mobe. He's a bit of a doctor. She said she's fine, but she has one question. Do they have a fire? He asked why you needed the fire of our tribe well guarded in his abode. If there's no fire, she'll do without meat. She'll need some fruit if there is any. Lena was given fruit, and sat eating and thinking what kind of primitive society it was that guarded the fires. She thought she'd have to teach them something, and she'd probably start by building a fire. When the night came, they went to bed, and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. I thought that even though they were sleeping together, luckily he didn't do anything strange. While she's lying there thinking, her system comes up and says she's happy to be lazy. You forgot your mission. Now you need to jump on this guy. The system shows her how it should be. She should jump on this guy and start kissing him. Why does she hesitate? The system asks her to kiss him and eat him, but isn't her mission to fulfill the Oasis quest? What does that have to do with this guy? And stop thinking about vulgarities. You've forgotten about the rains that came because of one kiss. Don't you want to unlock more skills to make it easier to complete your mission? Lene thought about the words. There was some truth in the system. Moving closer to Jialan, she doesn't think she has much to lose from kissing such a handsome guy. No, she can't, she told Lena, not much to lose. What the hell is she thinking? It's all about the white Dedan. The girl fell asleep, and in the middle of the night, she felt very cold. Jialan moved over to her and hugged her so that she could sleep peacefully. But she lay there and said in her sleep that she was cold, so cold. Lan put his hand on her forehead and realized she had a fever. Could it be hypothermia? She can't lie here anymore, he thought. He tried to wake her up, shaking her and asking if she could hear him, but she didn't wake up. Then he took her in his arms and said he would take her to Mobai right away. It's already night outside, but then the fox digs holes and says, "Finally finished. Great job digging another passageway." He's a real genius. Now he has his shortcuts everywhere. Licking his paws, reasoned the fox. Then Mobai's voice came out. "Hurry up and look this female. I think she's passed out," Lon said. "How did you find him?" Fox asked, turning from a fox to a guy. It wasn't like he was looking for it. He smelled it right. He has such a keen sense of smell that it's even annoying. Mobai the furry fox. Mobai leaned over and looked at this girl and said, "Oh, what a beautiful female. And what have you done to her that she is now in this condition? Since you don't know how to take care of girls, let him take care of himself instead." Holding out all his hands to the girl, Mobai said, but the guy wouldn't give him the girl. He stepped aside. Mobai got angry and said, "What does that mean? Do you even want me to save her or not?" Lon said, "Put aside unnecessary thoughts. This is his female." The guys started fighting with their gazes so hard that there were sparks coming from their squabbling. Another girl came in. She thought, what are Jialan and Mobai's brother doing here? This girl's name was Velvet Catseed. Lena became very hot and started to become delirious, saying she was hot. "Hey, Cousin Lon, who's that pretty girl? She seems to be in pain. Stop standing on the pillar. We need to find out what's wrong with her," the girl said. Touching her forehead, she said her forehead was very hot. "Do you know if she was very cold at first? She may have had severe hypothermia. If so, we can't delay," said Mobai. Velvet Cat noticed that the girl's clothes were very wet. She asked, "What, did she lie down with you, Brother Lon, in the mountains? It's very cold right now, and her clothes are all wet. No wonder she's cold." Lon's boyfriend thought about it and realized that it was indeed so. That's right, her clothes were wet because of the rain, and he had completely forgotten about it. Velvet Cat said they needed to change her first, and she would go get some of her clothes. Lon said it was all because of his carelessness, and forgot to bargain Velvet Cat for clothes. They all walked into the cave. Mobayulena kept raving. "Hot, so hot," she said. "Hey Linhei Jialan, if you can't change her, he can do it. Shut up," Lon said. Lon bent over the girl to begin dressing her. At one point, while he was changing her, Lena grabbed his arm and put his hand to her chest, and said the girl coldly, "She's so glad he's with her." But Lon's boyfriend blushed very much, because he thought that he had just touched, but then abruptly coughed now. Is not the time for this need to change her quickly, and in a big hurry. Haha, it's funny to see you embarrassed, Lan said Mobai. He asked you to let Simian or him change her, but you refused, saying it's your woman. Why are you talking so much? Said Lan, thanking for the potion later will bring him a boar, snatching the plate with the potion. Think that he saved her for his boar? Of course not. He did it because of the beauty of this female, and he thought that at last the boar would be able to eat properly. Sat the girl down on a rock so she could drink without choking on it. When he handed her a bowl of potion to drink, it came out of her mouth. The guy said that's not gonna work. It's like it's the only way. He took the potion and filled his mouth, and then he kissed her and handed her the potion so it wouldn't leak out and go in her mouth. Lena began to come to her senses, and hearing the flavors she felt in her mouth, a very bitter something. Just separate the commas. He's not violating anything. The girl began to come to her senses, but she couldn't tell if it was a dream or reality. She saw Lan's boyfriend, who was very handsome, and she thought it was a dream and she could do whatever she wanted. She just pounced on him and started kissing him. But when I opened my eyes, I realized it wasn't a dream, but a reality, and shook it off with the words, "Oh, you're finally awake," the Lan guy said. Looks like Mobai's healing potion helped after all. She need me, so it's because of him. She felt a bitterness in her mouth. God, what has she done? Shame on you. And then White appeared. Congratulations on discovering a new skill, Thunder. At the moment this skill is so you won't be able to use it yet. Lena thought that means she can unlock other skills too. It seems like a swim kiss really can do that. But it's so disconcerting. There's no way to change this method. White said there are other ways. She is, after all, her golden instrument. So try kissing someone else. Maybe then, like his Mobai. Wow, this beauty is so brave. I never thought that the ever-lonely lion Lan could find such a beautiful female, said Mobai, approaching the girl. Lene thought that White was saying that on purpose. It's obvious that she was talking about changing ways in general, not about the person. Who took Liz's hand and said hello. His name is Mobai. Would you like to be his female? Said he's much better than Lan. He's not only good at digging holes, he's also good at healing. Plus he's great at massages, and he's cute little ones too. So primitive that they ask women to be their females. First that scorpion and now Mobai, Lena thought. I'm sorry, but she doesn't think they know each other well enough to get close. So she took her hand away. Mobai turned into a fox and said you really don't want to make a very pitiful expression on his face, or rather his muzzle. So cute and fluffy, thought Lene, and can I touch your tail? It's so big and fluffy, said Lene. Well, accept, Mobai said, and let her touch it. It was unclear how, but Mobai was in Lene's arms very quickly. She noticed that he was very soft and fluffy, but she was surprised at his speed. While they were making out, Lan came in. Seeing the whole picture, he walked up to Lena, grabbed her hand and said, Since you are already healthy, we can go. Which Mobai had to recoil. Lonnie was walking so fast that Lenny couldn't keep up and yelled at him, Please slow down! And Mobai ran after them and said, What, did you forget your clothes? Are those her clothes? Oh, why does he have them? Lena didn't even notice that she was wearing different clothes. Examining herself, she asked, When did she have time to change her clothes? Or who changed her? So he's the one who changed her, she said. Well, you're his female after all, and so he's the one who had to take care of her clothes. You were unconscious and he couldn't ask your permission, so he changed clothes with his eyes closed. With his eyes closed? So nothing terrible has happened, Lena thought. But then suddenly Lan grabbed her arm, moved her toward him and said, Do you have something against him? You've already saved her life so many times and she hasn't even thanked you. How can she be unhappy about anything? She said. And you took your hand too hard now, it hurts her. Well, if you're not happy with him, why were you so angry when you found out he was cross-dressing you? Well, because we're not that close to each other yet, Lene said. You don't even know my name, do you? I think she's heard your name before. The guy introduced himself. His name is Lan. He's the head of the Western Malia tribe. Now it's your turn. What is your name and what tribe are you from? Her name is Line Minyu. As for tribe, honestly speaking, she doesn't have a tribe. No tribe? How is that possible? Or maybe she was banished from her home tribe, thought Lan. Or alternatively, though it doesn't matter now, you are a female of his, which means you will henceforth become a member of his Malia tribe. Pushing the guy away, Lene said, You've been going on and on about her being your female since the moment they didn't meet. But she hasn't actually agreed to anything yet. She? What does he have to do to get you to agree? The guy said. grabbing her hands. He doesn't. But they need to get to know each other first. Suddenly, Lon turned into a lion, sat down and sits with bulging eyes looking at her. His lion ears look so soft. Wait, what is she even thinking, and why did he suddenly turn? Maybe he did it because she touched Mobi's tail? Lena said she couldn't be bribed with that. Where she comes from, only those who love each other become partners. Love each other? Interjected the Lon guy. Lena explained to him that love is when two people have an invisible connection between them, and they are constantly thinking about each other. Sometimes they are sad because of it, and sometimes they are endlessly happy. As much as she wants to find her one and only pair, she still can't stop thinking about the fact that she could have two fluffies at once. While they were talking, for some reason it started to rain. Lena asked how it was raining here. Is the cave leaking, or is it because of her skill? Rain clouds could appear even in caves. I wonder what exactly activated the skill this time. The doe rejoiced. It's raining again. It rained some strange rain, it only rains inside the cave. He grabbed Lene's hand and said that she really was a goddess. There was no other way to explain it. Then he cradled her in his arms and told her how lucky she was to be here. The Malia tribe needs her. Lene was surprised. There, he'd done it again. Leanne's boyfriend started hugging her and kissing her on the back of her head. Leanne said, "Wait." Sorry, he was so excited he forgot. Lene stood in the cave, soaking wet from her own rain. Lon's boyfriend took the skin and said, "You've only just recovered, haven't you? We can't let you catch cold again." And he covered himself in line with the pelt to keep out the rain. Lene looked up and said to the guy, "Thank you." Lon's boyfriend asked to support the hide because he needs to get to the village soon and bring people here so the water doesn't fall in vain. "Okay," replied Lena. The guy said he'd be back soon. "Fight on, Lene. Don't be tempted by Jialan's good attitude. I've never heard of it raining right in a cave. It looks like that woman the chief brought is really a goddess," said one of the women in the tribe. "Let's better hurry up. We need to get the water underground soon so it doesn't evaporate." This place is so primitive, thought Lean. They don't make fires. They eat raw meat, and they store water inside the leaves. Lon's boyfriend walked up to Lena and asked her something. "Not so," she replied. "No, nothing, it's fine." "What, the priestess wants to see her again?" "Well, let's go," said Linai. When she came to the priestess, the woman had already taken out her blue orb and began to conjure something. "God of infinite light, give her strength," she said. "Please tell her if this girl has divine powers," pointing the orb toward Lena, said the female priestess. "Wow, she's really using a magic ball," thought Lene. "Their people are primitive in everything, yet this priestess seems different. So she's gone into a world of primitive beast humans with elements of magic, and as an explorer of flora and fauna, she has a distinct advantage." While Lene was thinking about her own, the lawn guy shouted cautiously. He quickly rushed to her and covered her with his body. "Are you okay?" asked the guy to Lena. She replied, "I'm fine, thank you for saving her. What happened to that rock? Why did it explode?" Approaching the priestess, they asked what had just happened and if she was all right. The priestess said she was fine, which was a backlash from the magic stone. "But this stone has been passed down from generation to generation, and it's never happened before." "Have you already found out if she has divine powers?" asked Lon. "She doesn't even know. Maybe she's too old to call on the powers of the gods. But one thing's for sure. She's an unusual girl." Jialan took the girl's hand and said as the priestess said, "Luck and misfortune go hand in hand. So he truly believes that her calling for rain for them time after time will be their great fortune." At this moment, Manfei walked over to the priestess and saw that it was the female holding Brother Jia's hand. "They have managed to get so close. So why is she taking advantage of Brother Lon's trust? She should definitely figure out something to get rid of that sassy female soon." When everyone returned to the tribe, a guy came up to Manfei and said that he had worked very hard on this necklace. "Please accept it." Again she spoke out. Didn't she tell him she didn't want to see him again? Wait a minute, though. Isn't this the perfect opportunity to get rid of that female? "Thank you for the beautiful necklace," I said to Manfei. "Can she ask him to help her with something?" Line was walking through this hot desert and thought that Jialan was so busy. Everybody goes to him for all sorts of reasons. For example, the chief. "My child is missing somewhere. Maybe he even ran away to the desert, and the chief said he would go and check." "The chief, her father, can't eat meat anymore, we need more vegetables." The chief replied, "Yes, okay," and went to get more vegetables. And so everyone went to the chief for all sorts of reasons, and he always helped them. Seems like it's not so good to be waiting for you. So much work and worry. She decided to go back to the cave alone, so as not to get in his way. She felt more and more like someone was following her, but she was actually really being followed by a guy. The one Man Fei had most likely asked. And looking back at her all the time, it seemed like there really was someone peeking at her. And she was right. Yeah, what's wrong with this female? Why is she so vigilant? Thought the guy. Had she really noticed him? But he must surely make amends for the sake of his beloved Man Fei. Memories. You remember the female the chief brought in the other day, don't you? She's afraid she'll bring much misfortune to their tribe. Will you help her get rid of her? It's this guy who remembers Man Fei asking him for a favor. Man Fei rarely asks for anything from others, so he urgently needs to figure out how to get rid of this unfortunate female. And then this guy had an idea. Different colored mushrooms. We don't know what he came up with yet. We'll find out later. He shouted, "Mistress Goddess!" And Lin turned around. "Who are you?" she asked as she approached the guy. He said his name was Zhao Lei. He was one of the people of this tribe. "Please accept this in gratitude for the rain you have called for, Goddess," and handed her the basket. When Lin saw what was in that basket, she was very surprised because there were mushrooms. Poisonous ones. "If you meet the same ones again, don't pick them," she said. "Poisonous? How so? He eats them himself all the time, right?" said fellow Zhao. Lin took one mushroom in her hands. "For your information, this mushroom contains as many as 2 types of poisons, peptide toxins and peptide parataxins. After consuming this mushroom, a person experiences nausea, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. After a couple of days, these symptoms disappear. But this is a deceptive sensation. By that time, so much damage to the internal organs. Fatalities are not uncommon. We need to get rid of them before someone else eats them," said Lin. Besides, no need to thank her. She had nothing to do with the rain showing up. In an instant, before he could finish speaking, Lin was attacked by this guy with the words, "What a tedious," and annoying. He didn't think she knew so much, and the poisonous mushrooms would have to act differently. No wonder Man Fei had instructed him to get rid of this female. "She's not as easy as she looks." "What are you doing? Let her go!" shouted Lin. He said he would finish her off, but she had such a face and body, it would be a shame to kill her without doing anything. He took out his long tongue and licked her with the words, "Why not enjoy her first?" But Lin was good at something too. She struck him between his legs there, the place to be deprived of offspring. "Damn female, you're too dangerous! I'll kill you now!" shouted Zhao. And he turned into a green giant lizard. "Again," Lin said. "How scary, still can't get used to their transformations." "It's a monster!" it shouted. "Come here!" and chased after the Lin girl. Shouted, "Jiaolan, save me," and ran with all her legs. She couldn't run anymore. It was still a long way away from the settlement. She wouldn't be able to reach Jiaolan in time. Plus, I tripped over a rock while running. That green monster only got excited. "Uh-huh," she exhaled. "Finally, ha-ha, now she has nowhere to run to." All Lin could think of was to grab the sand and throw it at his face, saying, "Back off. The lizard's weak spot is their eyes." The sand hit the spot, and it was the lizard guy who screamed. He hadn't expected this from Lin. While he was floundering there with that sand, Lena got up and walked. This time she took care of herself. Having come almost to the village already, she wanted to get there as soon as possible, but she had no strength at all. She fell to her knees in the middle of the sand, unable to move. Her eyes began to flicker and go dark, and she lay down on the sand altogether. That's when Man Fei came over. "Die already," she said. Even before she dies, she dares to shout out Jiaolan's name. Your life is in her hands now, and she wants that one to pray for death. When Jiaolan was already able to help everyone in his village, he picked a lot of different berries and fruits for his Lin. She must have already reached the cave and is waiting for him. And this fruit should be enough for her to eat, Jiaolan pondered. As he was walking along the road towards his village, he saw Lei Si. It's a lizard guy. He was lying on the ground. "I think he hit his head on a rock. He'll live," said the fox doctor. "You're so worried about him. Sit down already," he said to the land guy. "Yeah, what does this have to do with race?" He said late and still not back. "That's weird. It's pretty dangerous outside right now. He'd better go look for her." Man Fei walked into the cave. "Brother, where are you going?" she asked. "I heard that there was an attack. Have you figured out what happened yet?" "Race, you're finally awake. I'm glad you're okay," Man Fei said. "Race, what happened to you? Why were you lying unconscious in the middle of the road?" Lan's boyfriend asked. But today he started to tell me, but he was interrupted. Manfei started to say that with you, Foxy still has a headache and stroked his head. Whispers in his ear, need to blame it all on Lena. And then he cried out that he remembered what had really happened. Today he went to the mountains, shot some hares, picked fruit and mushrooms, and on the way back he was stopped by a goddess and passed out, and began to turn his head. And where are his hares and fruit? Jialan shouted. So you mean to say that Lin hit you on the head to take everything you had gotten? Rumors began to fly around the tribe, people discussing what they had recently heard, that theirs was not a goddess or goddess at all, but a spy from another tribe. How so? But that time she was the one who summoned the rain for them. Doesn't that make her a goddess? Saying that she was tricking them into trusting her? But no one knows yet what trick she used to summon the rain. The girls gathered outside were discussing. Passing by Jialan, heard a conversation from those girls. They heard that yesterday she hit Race on the head and stole all of his loot. Fortunately, he's fine now. Poor Lacey, the girls said. He had been searching for Lena all day, scoured their entire territory. But he still hadn't found her, Jialan thought. Lin, where did you go? Lan's boyfriend thought. As he approached his brothers, they asked him, have you found that spy from the other tribe? What will you do with her? They asked. Chiefs, it was you who brought the spy to us. You must deal with her soon. Who started spreading rumors about Linghe being a spy? Jialan asked. It's not that simple, everyone's talking about it, said one friend. Looks like Lei Si doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut after all, thought Jialan. His friend also said he didn't claim it, just assumed it. That's just a guess, so keep it to yourself, the Lan guy said. Don't tell anyone about what happened today. Once he's found, they'll have a normal explanation. The first thing to do is to clear Lena's name. The one who shushed everyone went to look for her. Lan's boyfriend. If those spreading these rumors get to her first, there's no telling what they might do to her. This was where he had found Lei Si yesterday. Jialan began to explore the area to see if he could find any traces. If you sniff, you can detect the odor of two kinds of blood. One of the odors belongs to, and the other, this place smells like Lena. Looks like someone hurt her here. Interestingly, the footprints, though indistinct, if you study them closely, you can realize that they belong to Lena. Back in the tribe, Jialan burst into the hut with the words, Lei Shi, you're a damn liar. Chief, what are you talking about? Why did you call him a liar? Lizard Boy shouted. What the hell did you do to Linai? Grabbing his neck with his hands, he found her blood and footprints in the spot where he'd been lying yesterday. What have you done to her? Once more he screamed. Admit it already. You took your animal form and chased after her. That's what caused her to fall and hurt herself. How did you know? No, she hit me on the head and pelted me with sand and stole the loot. Why would she do that? There's plenty of food in his cave, and punched him in the face. He didn't want to expose his lies in public. But if he did something to her, that's another conversation. And continues to bash him. Jialan, stop, the priestess said. If you keep beating him, he'll die. Then you'll lose your only lead. She checked Lena's consciousness through the magic stone a while ago. She's still alive, the priestess said. Right. We need to find her as soon as possible, thought the Lan boy. He yelled again that he was giving him one last chance to tell him where Lin was. But the guy's face was already so run down that he could barely speak. But he tried to answer. He really didn't know. She threw sand in his eyes and he saw nothing. She must have run towards the settlement. Now you know everything. No one sent the truth to them, the boy shouted. You almost insulted the goddess of their tribe with your words. What, don't just stand there? Go immediately to find her. He ordered all the people of the settlement. All the people heard the truth and said, yes, we're going to go look for her. The cave in which Linnae lies, she came to her senses. She's so hungry. I'd like some pork stew or poultry now, or at least some fruit, I told Lena. Will she really die of hunger and cold here, lying on the rocks? Thought the girl. If she dies here, she will definitely complain to the lords of the underworld for being wronged here. First she was ruined by her own creation in the lab, and then she was transported to another world where she didn't even get to spend a few days. She couldn't think of a crueler fate. Just when she thought she was saved, she's locked in some strange place. And the water's all over the place, so I have to pick it up by the drop. It's a shame to die like this. Useless system. It's useless in critical situations. And now it's pretending to be asleep. There was a mad rumbling sound and a light came on. A voice rang out. Lena, that was Lan's boyfriend. He found her. But only Linnae couldn't see it. It seemed to her that it had already come her death sentence. She said, "Master, have you personally come to take her life?" "Line, what are you talking to?" Lan's boyfriend said. "It's him, Jia-lan. It's all right, he found you." He picked her up in his arms and said, "At last he's found her. Now we have to go home." And he carried her. Jia-lan's warm and soothing touch. "Jia-lan, you're here. He's finally here," Line thought to herself. If only he'd found her sooner, thought the Lan guy. "She's very exhausted," Mobai said. "Even if she wakes up, it will take time to recover." Lan asked, "Isn't there anything we can do to help her with her recovery?" Mobai thought about it, and remembered that the cinnalin flower calms the mind and nourishes the body. If she took it for a while, she would recover. But this flower, there are too many wild beasts. He rarely goes there, so he doesn't have the flower on hand. The boy remembered that there were these flowers in the settlement. He said he would go and get them, and stood up. Just then, a crowd of people entered the cave, led by Man Fei. After so many days of starvation, she's still alive. Luckily, she has another plan, she thought. Brother Jia-lan, she spilled all the water stored in the cave. It was the water of our entire settlement, Man Fei said, pointing at Lena. Since she's a goddess, why did she do that to them? Yes, that's right. We don't believe the goddess would do such a thing, the people gathered shouted. We won't stand for her wasting all their water supplies, sharing the flowers of the sin line even less so. The guy got really pissed off and said, "First of all, there's no way he'll believe he spilled all our water. And secondly, if you don't want to give the flower back, he will go to the rocky forest and pick it himself. Bye-bye, he leaves in your care. If hunger comes, there is something to eat. There's plenty of food in his cave." Mobai told him not to worry, and he was waiting for good news, meaning he was waiting with a flower. Gai Lan went after the flower, pushing Man Fei and all the people away. Man Fei didn't understand why she was so furious with Lena, but she hoped she was content now. Brother Jia Lan, thought Man Fei, looking at him with fierce eyes. Because of that damn female. Lena, just wait. She'll find a way to kill her, Man Fei thought to herself. When Jia Lan went to get the flower, Man Fei had a plan. She turned to Mobai, who said that Linhei had overturned the entire water supply in the cave, and she should pay for it. We're asking you nicely to give it to us. We'll take care of it ourselves. Mobai said, Leave it to you, but things won't work that way. I promised Jia-lan that the goddess would be fine. But we warned you, if you don't want to give the goddess to us nicely, then don't accuse us of being rude. Man Fei ordered them to attack Mobai. He was alone and protected the goddess as best he could. He said, You can't stop for love. After all, he is a fox. He jumped down, grabbed Linai and said, I'll see you later. Mobai jumped into his tunnels that were hidden and disappeared. His tunnels were like a maze and very much had traps. Man Fei, do we still want to chase them? The others asked. How unexpected, she said. Mobai dug the tunnels here in advance. We stopped chasing him. We don't need to risk anyone getting hurt because of him. Suddenly the secretly dug tunnels from a few days ago really worked, Mobai said, trying to feed Lena the medicine. He originally dug these tunnels to specifically make it easier to meet you, but now he's afraid of being discovered by Man Fei. This tunnel will have to be buried, but he won't have much trouble digging up another one. And don't let her worry, he's got plenty of room. Certainly she didn't know they were in this tunnel, so goddess, you should be grateful to me for saving you. Wake up soon, it should have taken effect by now. Something bitter appeared in my mouth. Turns out it's potions again. That's the bitter from last time. Linny, you're awake, rejoiced Mobai. Every time I see you, said Mobai, he becomes so weak. For in Mobai you saved me, thank you so much. Lene, she asked. Before she passed out, she thinks she saw Jia-lan. So where is he now? Mobai said that she couldn't talk anymore from now on. You have to conserve your life energy. She's very weak right now. She needs to eat first, but not too much. He'll bring some fruit to give her some strength. Mobai looked at Linai. He thought she was very cute. She had such a face. He asked her if she wanted to eat some fruit. Leaning over to Lena, Mobai asked, So what do you want to eat? I'm sorry, Mobai said. He should have let her say she was hungry first, then kept her from speaking. Leaning even lower toward her, he said, Come on, keep your voice down. It might cut down on some of the physical activity. Maybe there's some porridge or soup, Lena asked. The closer he got to her, the weirder it felt. His ears began to itch and he felt a little uncomfortable. Mobai wondered, what is porridge or soup? It was the first time he had heard of it. What? They don't even have a fire here? Why not seize the moment and improve the food? Then she'd better eat 2 fruits to soften her stomach, and then she'll teach you how to make a good meal. Evening came, and Linnae decided to teach Mobai how to make fire. Yes, it's exactly like that. He's doing it right. Better drill faster, and then you'll get a spark, Mobai said. Okay, that's his business. If you want it faster, it will be faster now. Finally, after some time of friction, he got it right, and the fire appeared. When Mobai saw the fire, he was horrified. Fire! It's fire! He shouted. So hotly he turned into a vixen and jumped into Lena's arms. Using just a wooden stick, he was actually able to start a fire, which was very much appreciated in the tribe. You're so cool, a real goddess, she said to Lena. As Mobai sat in Lena's arms, she stroked him. He was so soft and comfortable. If she could travel through time, she would love to have him as a pet. While Lena and Mobai were enjoying the fire, Jialan arrived. When he saw them, he dropped the flower he had been looking for. Line! Jialan exclaimed. But he rushed at Mobai in a rage and said, Mobai, what do you want to do with my line? This is my female! Mobai shouted, Let him go, I wasn't going to do anything. Lan, you're back so soon? He should have told you to turn off the path when he left his mark. He was originally worried that Mon Fei would be able to find this cave, so he purposely left the mark so that she wouldn't suddenly find them and disturb his solitude with Linai, Mobai thought. Mobai, let him warn you one last time. He, Jialan, has no intention of sharing his female with others. It's a habit to enjoy women alone. And anyway, this goddess is his, and stop looking at her like that. Lan, you're talking to yourself. What makes you so sure Linai didn't become yours? Did she say yes? Mobai asked. Somehow he hadn't heard anything about this at all. Line, answer him. Jialan, she really isn't yours. What makes him think she gave her consent? It hasn't been discussed yet, Linnae said. Suddenly her body felt so heavy and she found it hard to breathe. But Lena didn't Mobai, she asked him to step aside. She belongs only to herself and no one else. She asked the guys both to get away from her and not touch her because she was starting to feel bad. But Jialan didn't listen to her and walked over, asking Lena what was going on. Do you feel bad? Linnae didn't answer that she was somehow having a hard time breathing, short of breath, gasping for air. Lan lifted the flower from the ground and said that you should eat it as soon as possible. After eating the stamens of the star spirit flower, you will feel much better and breathe easier. Linnae took the flower and chewed on it. It didn't taste as bitter as the medicine Mobai had given her. Lan asked Linnae how she felt after the flower. The girl replied that she felt much better. She was able to open her eyes and realized that the flowers were quite effective. Line noticed that Jialan's hand was bleeding. Are you in pain because you picked the flowers she just ate? The girl asked. Lan said that it was normal to bleed. He gathered a lot of star spirit flower stamens, which should be enough for you for a while. Jialan, let him explain to you, Mobai said. Mobai began to explain. These attacked. We ran. We were able to escape after some explanation. Lainey understood everything. So it was actually Jialan who found her, not the lizard who wanted to harm her. She was also imprisoned by Jialan. Well, why was she imprisoned in the reservoir? Who did it? Why was she locked up? Thought Linhei. So she needs to get over it, but she can't understand some things. Just thinking about them all the time. So, okay, the most urgent thing is to treat Jialan's wounds first. Jialan, thank you for saving her, and went to the stone forest to find this star spirit flower for her. Taking his hand, said to Lena to bandage his hand. Because his wound is too deep, so you can't treat it with neglect. It must be treated well. Otherwise it will fester. Jialan had done so much for her, but she just said that she wasn't his, and she wasn't like him. She broke his heart. Mobai, do you have any wound disinfecting herbs here? Jialan, it needs to be disinfected or treated with something. Mobai asked, what is disinfection? And what kind of bacteria does it kill? Linnae had forgotten that there was no concept of sanitizing in this place. She feels like she can't clearly explain to Mobai what he needs to find. Incidentally, she remembered seeing Baikal hellebore and Acnaterium splendens near Jialan Cave before. Baikal hellebore has a disinfectant and kills all viruses, and Acnaterium splendens can stop bleeding. Mobai, can she ask you for a favor? Leanne asked. I need to go to Lan's hut and pick 2 kinds of plants, yellow like spikelets and purple flowers. Half an hour later, Mobai brings all the plants that Lena had asked for. He said to Lena, Choose any splendor you want. Whatever you want, I found what you asked for. He has a very good memory. He followed her instructions and found those flowers right away. While Mobai was walking, then Linnae was already able to build a proper fire and cook the meat. Precious fire, she said. Mobai, you're back just in time. The water is just about to boil. Now put a bundle of Baikal Schlemnik and a bundle of Amaterium splendens. They should be boiled in water until boiling. The boys only watched Linnae brewing something, conjuring something up. They wondered what she was doing. She made a soup and a medicine. Lan, drink it, and after a while the wound will stop bleeding and heal quickly. So magical, Mumbai said. Turns out Lee can't treat patients and save people too. She knows it even better than he does himself. Then it would be better for Lena to be Mobai's teacher. Let him be your student, he said. Linnae refuses to be his woman. But it would be great if she became his master, Mobai thought. Who says master and apprentice can't embrace each other? What if he was up to something too? Jialan grabbed Mobai by the ears and said it was a stinky fox rubbing. And there are pancakes at every turn. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a white system appeared. Congratulations on unlocking the plant map feature, it beeped. Line grabbed the white one and said, well, finally. She pretended to be dead when Line was in danger. Now it came out that she didn't need anything from her. Though he is the system, she is not omnipotent. Let go, she shouted. It cannot interfere with your actions or influence your decision at critical moments. You can only rely on yourself, the system said. Lena, you'd better turn this on quick, White said and held out a ball of green plant to her. Lean touched her finger, and everything sparkled around her. Wow, Lean thought to herself. The plant map can store plants you have identified for future use. For example, you can now plant Baikal hellebore and Ochmatherium splendens in it. Inside is a very large container. There is enough space for everything. Not only can you unlock features, but powers as well. How many surprises there are on this journey that she didn't know about, Linnae said. A dungeon. Scorpion Boy is lying there thinking, is everything okay with Manfei now? His case shouldn't concern her, should it? He thought. Manfei bursts into the dungeon. Scorpius Boy asks her why she's here. Where are the guards? Manfei replies that the guard was knocked down by her. She came to save him. Jialan is now in love with a woman named Lean, and she fears that she will execute him for her own sake. What? Scorpius Boy asked. He actually wanted to fight for Manfei. So you'll have to run and leave this place, said Manfei. But he grew up in this town. Where would he go? You must go and take refuge in the Sita desert. And Jialan, no, face it. You are giving up. You must be ready for anything. You can give Sita a message to show your sincerity. Just tell Sita that Jialan has a goddess capable of causing rain. When the time comes, Sita will definitely come to capture Linhei. Jialan returned with the goddess, cheering in the tribe. The children who ran up asked Jialan, they heard that you are heading to the stone forest to look for the star spirit flower. After all, the stone forest is so dangerous. Did you hurt yourself? The children asked. He was lightly wounded, but fortunately, thanks to the goddess's treatment, his wound healed quickly. Wow! The children exclaimed. The goddess not only causes rain, but also heals. That's amazing. Linnae replied that she just knew something and was very good at it. Mobai saw the mother and sister of the flight lead the way. What are they doing? What happened to the bandaged hands? Rice escaped from prison last night. He ran away and knocked out 2 guards. All were very angry and arrested his mother and sister to atone for his sins, reported the girl, and told Lena obviously the mistake was made by Flight, why his mother and sister should pay for his guilt. The Flight made a mistake, and the mother is responsible, and the sister and not in time did not stop it, said Lan. What about the father of the Flight? He is not responsible, asked Linhei. Their tribe is different from other tribes, which are dominated by women. Men are less, and they have to help in hunting for food for the whole tribe, replied Lan. So the disciplinary responsibility of Race's father is not big. Just help the tribe, and for a year he can hunt for free to get meat from animals. He's very hard on women, said to Lena. Can a father not be responsible for a child just because he goes out hunting all the things you can do at home? Doesn't the mother count as a contribution? She's a victim. She hasn't said anything yet, so why should his family get hurt? She's gonna stop all this. Lena, please wait, shouted Lon. Your body still hasn't recovered. Don't run so fast. Mobai wondered what she said made sense. Wondering what it meant to sit together or sit next to each other, thought. The family is tied to huge rocks with ropes, and everyone is screaming punishment. Only angry men were standing around gossiping badly. And these two women, one said that the girl had such a nice figure. He had wanted to court her for a long time. And Lei is so nice, it seems they are very lucky. He wants everyone to have a child with him. Please stop being impatient, Manfei shouted. Be quiet, hear her out, for the criminal of the flight has escaped, and his father has been punished by banishment to hunt in the fierce devilish Gobi. Dali, they are to punish their mother and sister to right the wrongs of flight. The women shouted, No, let them go. Zecia, Race's mother, and Revi, Race's sister. Manfei announced that they would be held in a captive camp from today. Everyone can punish them. Let them continue the lineage, add new life to their tribe. Line was just in time, Manfei said. She poked her finger at her and said that here she was, the sinner who had turned over the water stored in their city. She wasn't the one who spilled all the stored water. When she woke up after she passed out, she was all out on the ground, Lin said. What you say has yet to be proven. Where is your proof? Let's send the criminal line to the prisoner camp, Manfei shouted. Manfei thought that no one saw that she was the one who spilled the stored water. That's why Lina has no proof. Jialan had already gotten to these accusations. He asked, Who dares to speak ill of their goddess? Manfei shouted, Don't you have to atone for the mistakes you've made? You always say she's a goddess. Let it rain immediately and bring the water back to us. Then since you're a goddess. Even though she's not a real goddess, but she can make it rain. That way she could use her goddess identity to save innocent women, Lian thought. Then the white system showed up again and said she had a good idea. But the rain skill wasn't available yet. But you recently discovered the thunder and lightning skill. Should we try them out? She will bring rain to the tribe, but not now, Lina said. She will try to do her best. Even though she is a goddess, she needs to absorb enough spiritual energy from heaven and earth before she can summon wind and rain. The last rain drained her spiritual energy. It takes some time, and there will be rainfall again, Linné said. Who knows how long it will take you to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, Manfei said. When will it rain? All the stored water in the city has run out. Do you want to starve them to death? People began to cry out that indeed there was not enough water in the house, and not for a few days. They don't want to die of thirst, people shouted. When will it rain? You're what? It's going to rain bright moonlight? She's bringing a shipment of water back to the tribe to make sure everyone doesn't run short of water. Can you accept this? Lan shouted. Jialan said that the rainy season would begin next month. But until then, he would go to Aize and return with a supply of water. Jialan shouted, Ask your men. They'll be satisfied with this and won't panic anymore. The tribe gathered around shouted that yes, as long as they had water, no claims would be made. Mobai came up to Lina and asked her why she was defending them so fiercely. She explained that she did not agree with the punishment Manfei had given them. Linné said loudly, Then release these two, and pointed her finger at the woman and her daughter chained to the rock. Even though she was very scared to confront the whole tribe right now, but she wants to try her best to save them. Zecia, the mother, and her daughter Revi, they came alive at what they heard, and both said in one voice, Goddess! Manfei indignantly asked, But that's exactly how they punished the traitor family in Malia. Why is she against it? Manfei's minions also came to her defense and said that Lin had no right to make her own rules. But the girl did not despair. She said, She does, because she's a goddess. Just because this kind of punishment is their tradition doesn't mean it's the right way. She was sent to them to change the current state of affairs and eradicate injustice. Lacey is the only one to blame. His family has nothing to do with it. She can understand why men don't resent injustice. They pursue their own selfish goals. But what about the woman? She can't understand why they're all going along with them. Lina turned to Manfei, who asked her how she could so easily leave these women to be torn apart. Then the girl turned to the other women and girls and asked, What about them? Aren't they afraid that someday they will suffer the same fate? Volkov shouted, and she thought they would let Lacey go unpunished for what he had done. Lin pointed menacingly with her finger at this fellow wolf, saying that since he wouldn't leave him unpunished, perfectly well he could set off and find him himself. They abuse poor women and children. The girl put her finger up and said that God was watching their deeds. And the reason she was so slow to absorb spiritual power was because of their cruelty, stupidity, and ignorance. Rivi's girl, who was now tied to a rock, cried out, "Save them!" Tears were pouring from her eyes. "Goddess, please help them!" Yes, and the girls around them, if only for a little while, thought about it and began to blurt out too that they always thought it was unfair. Someone said, "Right, why should innocent women atone for the sins of men? And it is indeed very cruel. The goddess has come to help them." One of the guys shouted that it was all lies and she should stop saying such things, grabbing his axe. He thought about the fact that soon he would finally be able to enjoy Zesishia and Lei Wei. He can't just leave it like this. They have to pay for their sins and bear them children. He just thoughtlessly threw it at Lena. It all happened very quickly. The girl didn't even have time to realize and retreat at least a step away. How suddenly, unexpectedly, this axe was pierced by an arrow, and it did not fly to its proper destination. Jialan's loud voice rang out. "Stop it now!" he shouted. Holding the bow in his hands, the boy shouted that he had attempted the life of a goddess. "How dare he!" At that moment, Mobai thought that thank God Lean was all right. There was a little girl standing next to him who said, "Wow, the chief looks so majestic. There's a reason she brought him a bow and arrow." Jialan, who took another arrow, said to them, "After all, he has already warned all of you that no one would be allowed to touch Lena, or they wouldn't put their leader's word for it." I aimed his bow with an arrow already ready, towards the guy who had launched the axe at Lena. The guy immediately started waving his hands and saying no, no. He no longer had any doubts. But Jialan decided to teach him a lesson and shot an arrow into his leg anyway, as a lesson to him and everyone else. Said it was a final warning. If anyone else dares to harm dear Lena, the arrow will no longer be in his leg. He gives them his word, and he will kill that insolent man. Didn't they just hear the goddess herself explain that it was because of their sinful traditions that their tribe of Malia was insufficiently blessed by the rains? Jialan took Deerleen's hand, lifting her up. He shouted, "As their leader, he declares that from this day forward, everyone is only responsible for their own deeds. The sinner's family will not pay for him." Lan urged everyone to forget this cruel tradition. Everyone was responsible only for his own deeds. People began to cheer. Some shouted, supporting the goddess. Everyone loved it. There were, of course, some disgruntled wolves in the tribe who thought, "Damn it, this female was the reason they missed their prey." Leanne stood and cheered, smiling. Quite in response, she thought, "It's so good that Lanyu was around. She wouldn't have been able to accomplish this alone." The guy looked at the girl and realized she had something to say or ask. He asked her, "Is something wrong?" Lean laughed and said, "No. She just wanted to thank him. To say thank you to him for trusting her and for always supporting her." Another one who was not happy out of the whole tribe was Mon Fei. She thought, "Damn, I can't believe this female has changed everyone's mind with just a few words." And she told her big brother not to forget about the water from Izeth. The girl turned around and walked away. She was dissatisfied very much, frowning and thinking that she shouldn't relax. When Lei Si found Lei Ying, she wouldn't be happy. Mother and daughter were released, breaking the rope. The girl rushed to Lena, hugging and thanking her. "Thank you so much." Lena told them not to be afraid. Soon, they would be home. The girl added that if they were harassed by anyone about Lei Si, they could go to her or Jialan, and then they would definitely punish them. Jialan stood watching her comfort the women, and thought about how many more secrets she had that he didn't know about. Suddenly, a woman's scream sounded not far from them. "Ouch, that hurts!" Everyone turned around to see what had happened. Standing nearby was a pregnant Una girl from the Malia tribe. She shouted that she was in labor and asked what to do. Jialan shouted loudly, "Men, hurry up! Help Una reach the priestess abode!" Lin ran up to Jialan, taking his hand. She asked where he was going. Jialan replied that in their tribe, the birth of a child is a sacred event and must be attended. Lena then said that she would go with them, too. In one of the tribe's dwellings, all those who must attend the birth of the child have gathered. The girl screams in pain to be stopped. She doesn't want to feel it. She is in a lot of pain. In this dwelling lay a pregnant girl, screaming. She had a wooden stick in her mouth so she could clamp her teeth and it wouldn't hurt so much. Nearby stood a priestess who was praying to the gods to bless their tribe for the birth of this child. When Lena saw this happening, she was outraged. "This is how they deliver babies here. Is this some kind of joke? The baby won't be born if you just stand around and pray." Una fainted from the very intense pain. She was lying on a rock, sweating. Jialan shouted, "She has fainted!" Then Mobai ran up, taking a refreshing herb out of a bowl, asking, "Maybe it will help." The priestess said she didn't need anything. She's afraid this child is no longer of their tribe. Jialan sighed and resentfully said, "Is their non-tribe really cursed by the gods? So why don't they give them children?" Line shouted, "Wait, priestess, have you decided to give up on her and the child? Yes, how can that be?" The priestess covered the girl's head with a cloth and said, "There is nothing more they can do to help her. She will die soon." "Like nothing?" said Lena indignantly. "No, they can still save them. She'll try to deliver the baby herself. After all, she took a first aid course in that life. Maybe that will help her." The priestess tried to object to something she said, but she was interrupted by Jialan. In a formidable voice, he said, "The priestess wants to try. Let them try. Let's give her a chance even if it doesn't work out. It will be better than just standing there and watching." Mobai also cried out that their past attempts had always failed. However, Lanai, their goddess, might be able to make it work. Then the priestess said, "All right, let her try. May their tribe and gods bless her." And the priestess opened the girl from the cloth with which she had covered her. Lena turned to Jialan and said that she would need some fruit to restore Una's strength. The guy replied, "All right, he'll bring it right away." She also went up to Mobai and asked for the herbs he had brought. She would also need a knife, a hide, and hot water. "The water needs to be heated for sure," repeated Linai. "Put it in your hands on your stomach." She thought she had to hurry. When the waters broke, the baby would be deprived of oxygen. There wasn't much time left. Mobai ran up to Lena and asked, "Does she still understand? Why the knife and the hide? But why does she need water heated on the fire?" The boy is very excited because the place where the fires are kept is far away. He's afraid he won't make it in time. Lien ran up to Mobai and tried to calm him down by stroking his cheeks. She asked him to remember what she had taught him last time. The boy stood up, thought about it, and said, "That's right." Mobai cheered up and said okay. He would build a fire and make hot water. The priestess replied that she still had water at home and he could use it. Many of the tribe gathered around the dwelling where the girl was giving birth. They knew she was in labor, and they wondered if she was all right. They had heard that when the priestess said there was nothing that could be done to help, the goddess had called for help. One of the chiefs of the tribe saw Mobai outside, not in a dwelling, and asked, "What is he doing? Why is he not helping?" Mobai was sitting outside, placing a piece of bark on the ground, and with a second stick twirling it with his hands very quickly to produce sparks of fire. He had already prepared a vat of water standing on a special fire. All that was left for the boy to do was to get the sparks of fire. He twirled the stick with his hands so fast that he got it all right, and fire appeared. The tribe who were watching nearby, upon seeing the fire, shouted that "Sacred fire! Mobai has summoned the sacred fire!" Mobai was pleased with himself. He was glad that the goddess had taught him how to make fire. He put the spark on the rest of the wood, and began to fan the fire so that it covered all the wood he had stacked. The water began to heat up. Some of the women and men of the tribe began to admire the goddess. After all, she was the real one sent to them by heaven. They thought they should worship her soon and ask her to forgive them for their rudeness. But Jialan blocked their way and would not let them in. He said, "Wait, the goddess is very busy right now. She is currently fighting for the life of Una's child. If they rush in, they will only hinder her, and both the child and the woman will die." At this very moment in the dwelling, Lean is trying to bring Una to her senses. She tells her to hold on and think of her child. She needs to find the strength to bear it all. She holds a special herb to her nose that gives off an unusual odor. People can usually come to their senses because of that odor. Then when the person is unconscious, one must first pinch the tray groove. Then massage the wigwam point. Then press the bohui point. Linnae really hoped that the refreshing herb would help her wake up. She continued to massage the special points that would make a person awake. And surprisingly, Una opened her eyes. She saw Line. The girl said, "Goddess!" Linnae held out the fruit to her with the words. She was finally awake. She should eat this. She needed to gain strength. After Lena recommended that she try to relax a little. If she does everything Lena says, breathes well and takes care of her strength, everything will be fine, and a healthy baby will be born. Mobai ran into the dwelling saying that the hot water was ready, but Lien looked at that small bowl and realized that it wasn't enough. Jialan, then he will have to bring some more water. Afterwards, Lena said that the priestess would need her help. The priestess would have to keep rubbing hot water on Una to speed up the opening of her uterus, and Mobai would rub the points she showed him, which would soothe Una's pain a little. Lien shouted in a loud voice, "Let's get started!" And everyone got to work. Some ran to fetch water, some started rubbing with water, and some just pressed on special points to relieve the pain. All evening, all night, they diligently did everything Lien told them to do, and eventually by morning, a healthy baby boy was born. Lien took him in her arms and told him he was fine. He was perfectly healthy. Lin brought the child to the mother and explained to her that she had done a good job. So the baby is alive and well, and so is she. Mobai spat on the ground and said, "It's finally over." And he was so tired, but he was very glad she had been born. The priestess sat down in lotus position and prayed to the gods, and thanked them that they had not yet given up on their tribe. Jialan walked over to Lena and stroked her head, saying that she had done well. She had done a very good job. When Lien came out of the dwelling, practically the whole tribe was present near it. Everyone bowed and said they were praying for her, for forgiveness. In the past, they had been ignorant. However, from now on, they were at her disposal. Lien got very excited and told everyone that there was no need to kneel. It's not like she's mad at them. The girl, after seeing all this, thought, "What a sudden change of status. Now she's going to heal well." Lena returned to the dwelling to take the baby, stroking it to calm it down a bit. She carried him out to show the tribe that the baby was alive and well. The tribe began to cheer, raising all their hands in the air. They shouted together, "Thank you for your generosity, goddess," or didn't remember what Mobai said. Someone was interested in making fire with a stick. If you think about it, there are others besides this method. You can start a fire with the help of 2 stones. To do this, you need to take 2 hard stones and start rubbing them against each other. And you can also use some concave surface. If you use a concave polished stone, you can connect the sun's rays and heat the kindling. Linnae shouted out, "If you want, she can teach them." The tribe exclaimed, "Yes, very willing." The people began to stretch out their hands for her to see them, that they were ready to be trained. A little later, a priestess came out and addressed Lena saying, "Goddess, can she carve all these methods in stone so that they can master them all in a day?" Lena gave the child to Jialan to support him. The guy even smiled from the feelings that came over him. He immediately imagined that he too wanted him and Lien to have children. They were sitting together, and they each had a child. It had been literally 15 minutes and Linai was already able to draw everything. The girl said she was finished, and to make it easier for them to understand, she used illustrative drawings. She was also quickly able to explain and show everyone everything, saying that these were the available ways of making fire in their conditions. The girl was so engrossed that she continued to tell further. She was sure that some of them had stomach aches when they drank water or ate meat. Now once you learn how to make fire, you can roast meat and boil water. Then no one will have a stomach ache. Jialan saw a strange pattern on the stone. He asked Linhe, "What is this?" The boy didn't understand. The girl began to explain, "It's called evaporation. That's how they could get water." She remembered another way to get water in the desert. First, they need to find a place where they always get sunlight. Then dig a hole in that place and place a water container there. Then cover the hole with a large sheet and fix it with a stone. And at the end you will have to place another stone on the sheet, so that it stretches the surface, and all the drops of water fall into the container. Sho Jialan asked in surprise, "You can get water this way and they suffered so much?" Lin answered him that yes, there would not be as much water as they would like, but that this method would save them in dire need. It's simple. The sun's rays heat up the soil inside the pit, so all the moisture starts to evaporate. They'll just collect it in one container. She also drew how exactly women should be delivered and cared for after childbirth. Postpartum care is very important for the recovery of a woman's body. She turned to the lady priestess and Mobai. She knows they can teach her how to do it. Mobai admired Lena. She knows literally everything about literally everything. Unbelievable! Long live the goddess! He exclaimed. And the tribe that was nearby also began to cheer. Long live the goddess! Long live the goddess! Lena doesn't know for what reason, but she felt so warm inside. For those who understand science, change and worlds are not scary. Not far away stood Manfei. She stared at Lena and thought that when she heard that it was the reindeer who had decided to give birth to Una, she thought that she would definitely mess it up. But I didn't expect it to not only fail, but to win everyone's love. Manfei thought that if Linhei was defiled and mutilated by several people at once, Brother Jialan would definitely no longer love her. It was time for Lena to go now. She said goodbye to the tribe, saying goodbye to everyone. The tribe waved goodbye to the goddess, too. On the way going home, Jialan asked if he was really going to fetch water from Azet. Mobai had heard that Azet had been taken over by Lei, and they don't get along. It is dangerous for him to go there now. Jialan replied that although Linnea had solved the dire need for water, he still needed to provide the tribe with a supply of water. He would fulfill his promise. The boy said he would prepare supplies of provisions and water today and set out tomorrow morning, and asked Lena to go with him. She was very excited to go with him. Yes, of course, Lon replied. Don't worry. I'll be there to protect you. Leanne remembered something she had wanted to ask for a long time. But because of all the incidents, she didn't have time. She said, By the way, Lanya, have you ever seen green beads like this before? The girl held out her hand to him, and in her hands were small green pebbles. I found them when I was locked up in the water vault. This kind of small stones must be very rare for the desert. Lon took these pebbles, and he suspects that the owner of these debris is the one who destroyed all the water supplies. Suddenly he cried out. He had already seen such beads from Manfei, who wore a necklace made of such beads. Linnae was very surprised. She said she thought she'd have to talk to her before they went to Azith so she wouldn't cause any more trouble. Lanya said he would go with her. They need to find her before morning. Suddenly, Mobai became indignant. Lena was saying that in order for it to rain, she needed to lie to herself the spiritual power of the heavens and earth, if any way to speed up the process. It was just that if it rained soon, they wouldn't have to go to such a dangerous place. Lene blushed because she realized there was no other way, and replied to the Mobai that there isn't yet. She realized that the rain skill was currently in rollback, but even if it wasn't, she would have to do it again to summon rain. This was too embarrassing for her. Okay, decided to back up Lean and said, yes, she can make it rain, but they can't always rely on her alone. For water, their tribe must rely only on themselves. Someday they will surely turn the western part of the desert into an oasis. Jialan was even willing to try to dig a tunnel with his own hands from the river to their settlement so that they could finally have water. At that moment, Lene heard from him what she had long wanted to know. So that's what he's dreaming about. Wait a minute. Isn't his dream the same as her assignment that the system gave her? Lena said she had heard that you, exactly the western, southern, and northern tribes, have your own treasures. And if you combine them, the goddess of water will arrive and turn an entire desert into an oasis. She asked the boys if they had heard anything about these treasures, but the guys waved their heads that no. Jialan said that he could ask around. At this time, Manfei was resting in her cave. In her hands, she holds those green beads. The girl is looking at them and thinking. Jialan and Mobai went to prepare skins and provisions for the morning. I wonder if they are doing well. Manfei was lying down and dreaming of Jialan when suddenly she heard some noise from the street side, not far from the cave. She got up to go check what happened there. Coming out of her cave, the girl asked Jialan if they had returned already, because she thought that and she saw that Lena had fallen into her trap. The girl was hanging suspended in a net that was tied to a tree. Then Manfei had a plan. She put on her hat, mask, and cape, picked up her spear and came to Lena, standing in front of her. Screamed, "Who are you?" Immediately she demanded that she let her go. Even though she was hovering far away, Manfei could see that it was a stranger with a woman's outline. Manfei shouted for the captive to shut her mouth and not talk, her annoyance. She started poking her spear right at Lenai, thus tearing the netting a bit. Lena screamed. She didn't even know who she was or why she should listen to her. It was a good thing Lena had a small knife. After the incident with Lacey, she started carrying it around with her. She took it out by cutting the netting to get out. When Linne fell from the top of this net, she caught a bit of Manfei, and the girl's mask and hat flew off her head. Linne saw the girl attacking without a mask. She turned out to be Manfei. Linne asked in surprise, "What? So it was her all along?" Manfei replied to her that originally she had just wanted to disfigure her and make her a female that everyone would take advantage of. But now that she found out it was her, it was either her now or not to live. Manfei took her spear and swung it at the girl with cries of, "Die now!" Lena didn't have any proper weapons with her for defense. She grabbed small stones from the ground and threw them into Manfei's face, causing the girl to let her guard down a bit. After which Lene grabbed her arm and flipped her over so that Manfei fell to the ground. And jumping on top of her with her own spear, she stabbed Manfei in the neck so she couldn't move. Jialan finally managed to arrive in time. He saw the girls fighting and asked Lena what was going on here. Manfei immediately started crying and shouting to him, "Brother Lan, she's trying to kill me! Please save me!" T was furious that someone was trying to kill someone. She went too far with her lies. Jialan has calmed down. She was the only one he believed. The guy asked to stand up and let him deal with the situation. Lian realized that Lan trusted only her without a doubt. The girl answered well and stood up. Then Manfei began to say, "Brother Lan, he must be on her side." The girl began to cry and her expression changed at once. She so kindly became miserable. The boy got down on one knee and told Manfei that if her father hadn't picked him up, he would have died in the desert. He had always wanted to repay his kindness. Lan pulled out a piece of wool and said that they had grown up together, and he always thought of her as his little sister. After wiping her tears from her face with this piece of wool, he added that that was why he often pampered her and forgave all her little faults. Perhaps that's the reason he didn't do well as a big brother. Because of his soft-heartedness, she grew up so arrogant and managed to hurt Lin several times. Lanai is his woman and older sister, and he won't let her get hurt. Manfei began to say that it was Line who had tried to kill her, not Shiline. Jialan stood up and became indignant. Would Manfei really continue with her lies? She was the one who had prepared this net and spear. He was the one who had once taught her how to weave such nets? Or had she forgotten about it? Afterward, the guy asked, and why they found pieces of her necklace in the water storage cave. She has to tell him the truth. She's the one who poured out all their water supplies. Manfei began to cry and said that no, she had not poured out their water. The girl understood that Brother Lan was so angry, but she couldn't say that it was her. Otherwise the whole tribe would turn their backs on her. She kept yelling that it wasn't her and made up a story as she went along. Like a couple days ago, she saw Lei Sai pour out all their water supplies and was about to go tell her brother about it, but he spotted her. Lei Sai grabbed Manfei by the neck. It caused her necklace to break. He told her not to tell anyone about it, or he would make her one of his females, and then give her as a gift to Lei Yi. He noticed her and threatened her, telling her to blame it on Lena. Manfei went on to say that she was so scared that she didn't dare to oppose him. And besides, Brother Lan has not cared about Manfei since Linghe appeared, but only about Linghe. Therefore she hated her. Jialan said that this did not excuse her behavior, and instructed her to apologize to Linghe, then tell the truth to the entire tribe, and promise not to do it again. If she didn't, he would stop treating her like a sister, and wouldn't be so soft-hearted. Manfei grabbed his hand, and asked him not to turn away from her. Manfei angrily said, "Well, I'm sorry." Jialan said, "That's no good. You need to apologize properly." Manfei sighed, lowered her head, and said she apologized. She would explain everything in front of the whole tribe tomorrow. Please forgive her. The girl decided to ask if she could make it up to them and go fetch water in Eze with them. She thought that although it was difficult to apologize to this female, if she could go with her brother to fetch water, it would greatly strengthen their relationship. Line said that she would accept her apology for Lani's sake. The girl thought that she didn't really believe the words of this Manfei. However, her father was kind to Jialan, who helps her out every now and then. Line reflected on the point about making amends. It's a good offer. Then as atonement, she'll be the one responsible for the exchange with Iseth. Jialan replied, "Good. Then he and Linhe will go out first tomorrow morning and go in search of other water sources. Manfei and the other tribe members will go to Aize to get water and skins to exchange. They have already prepared everything, and they will catch up with them. Monfei thought that she wouldn't be able to spend time with Lani then. The girl grimaced and wasn't very happy with the suggestion. Xiaolan saw that the girl was unhappy about something. He asked her, but Monfei said that everything was fine. She thought that if she refused again, her brother would be angry with her. All because of that damned Lingye. She'd be dancing when they got to Iset. It was early morning of the next day. Jialan had already woken up Linhei, and they slowly walked. The girl asked them whether it was time for them to leave already. How are they going to get there on foot? It's so far away. The girl pulled herself up and yawned because she hadn't gotten much sleep since it was very early in the morning. Jialan quickly turned into a huge lion. He said, "Get on." Lena clarified that he would let her ride on him. The guy said yes, but he already sat down and repeated to her. Lene started running around him like a little kid and says she never thought she'd ever be able to ride a lion one day. She ran up to him and began to squeeze his hands and say, "What a thick mane." Then she ran up to the tail, taking it in her hands. She proudly said, "Thick and long tail." She finally climbed up on that lion and again said, "Of course, soft fur and favorite ears," and started rubbing his ears. She couldn't resist in any way. She liked it so much. At this moment, Jialan wondered if she liked him so much. She had been touching his sensitive spots and stroking him for so long. Lena said, "Yes, she does. Who doesn't like a big fluffy kitty?" Jialan firmly said she said it herself then. When they sort out their affairs and return to the settlement, he will answer her as befittingly. And when that happens, she will no longer be able to refuse him. Now he growled loudly and said, "We must hit the road," and they rushed off. As they drove through the desert, Lene was not very happy. She said, "Wow, that was fast." She was so glad that she went along with him. The girl admired the local scenery, nature, the wind that developed her curls, but then she thought about the words Lon had said. I wondered what he had been talking about recently. To say no? What did he mean by that? A few days passed, and finally Lene and Lon arrived in the city. They walked through the local streets. Leon rejoices, saying, "Wow, this is the town." It reminded her of her past life. The girl marveled at the fact that there are so many people here. The couple walked just through the local market where so many different things were being sold. Lon explained that AZ is one of the few cities in the west that is washed by the river. On top of that, the south city of Yihei is located on the other side of the river. Therefore, Izet has become a major trading center between the west and south. Lena replied that that was it. It all made sense now. She thought, that's why this town looks so much more civilized than the village of Malia. Since this is a local bazaar, things happen here. Staring at one of the buildings, she didn't see a man in front of her and accidentally bumped into him. He shouted at her, "Watch where you're going!" The girl immediately apologized, saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't see him," and scratched her head because she had hit her head. The guy, when he also raised his head and saw her face, he thought, what a beautiful female. He immediately wanted her to be his wife, and the guy started offering his services. He said, "She's young and very beautiful. She doesn't want to see him with women." But there was his wife and 2 kids standing nearby. The wife says, "Husband, what's he doing there?" The guy immediately started showing off to Lean, showing off his muscles, his torso, and saying, "No, get better than mine." Well, Lena yelled that he had a wife and kids. Why the hell is he trying to hit on another woman? That's disgusting. At this moment, Jialan walked over. Since he was going about his business, he didn't see what was going on. But when he came over, he realized that his woman was being clung to. He grabbed her by the waist, pulling her closer to him, and told her that she was his woman. He's the only one she needs as much as he needs her. So get out of here. At that moment, Lene thought he was saying again that she was his woman, but for some reason, this time she didn't seem so steadfast. The girl noticed that her heart began to beat faster for some reason. Lon said they could move on, and she should stay away from all those smelly males. He grabbed the girl and led her forward. The pair walked a little farther and caught a local squabble. One guy was yelling about paying 1 skin a day for a place in the market, and where his skin was. This yeller turned out to be the owner of Della's market. The merchant tried to answer, saying to the owner, "These days have been unlucky for him. Let me pay with this stone instead of a hide." The trader was a fellow named Zeon. He was a white-tailed jay. The market owner shoved his foot in the direction of these stones and said, "Who needs them?" And then they all pushed him and shouted, "If there is no hide, he has no right to this place. He's got to get out. Isit doesn't need a weakling like him." The boy fell and bruised himself a little. Just near him, the rock they were arguing about rolled up to the girl's feet. She looked at it and was delighted. "What a big diamond! It's the legendary pigeon egg diamond. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about at all." Line put her hand up to the salesman and asked, "Is he okay? Not hurt?" The guy replied that he was fine and started to walk up. The market owner himself was standing nearby. He saw Line. The guy said, "Why is there such a beautiful woman here? How cute! This loser is just a weakling who doesn't deserve her attention. He's really rich and very powerful." If she wanted to visit his luxurious house, he reached out his hand to touch her. Jialan, walking over, grabbed his hand and said, "Shut your mouth! How does he have the nerve to touch his woman?" The guy, seeing Jialan closer, shouted, "Jialan, it's him! What is he doing in Isit?" Jialan threw that smartass far away. The guy fell down and started shouting, "How dare he succumb to the Death Civ Lord on the ground? He will tell him about everything right now." Jialan, Mobai said they're not getting along with this Sith guy. Maybe they should grab this guy so he won't give them away. The people standing nearby began to discuss, "Isn't that Jialan, Sita's nemesis?" Jialan heard the others discussing and said that there was no need. Many people have already recognized him. Since this was his territory, they were bound to run into him sooner or later. Besides, he had never been afraid of anyone, not even him. Jialan took out the hide that was hanging behind him at his waist, tied up. When he approached the merchant, he said he had a hide. Could he trade it for this stone? But the merchant said not at all. He would give it away as it was. Thank them for their help. Jialan told the merchant that no, the pelt would stay with him after all. He wasn't trying to help him. He was only trying to protect his woman. Jialan held out his hand to Lina and said to her, and in his hand was a gemstone that he had exchanged for a pelt. He just noticed that she liked him. Consider it his thanks for her going to Izeth with him. Line replied, "Thank you, Lan. She likes it a lot." The girl took it and thought, who wouldn't like it after all? It's a 10-carat diamond, and should definitely be taken with her when she returns to her world. The voice of the chief sounded. They turned around and saw a resident of Mylan Mentai. He was standing with several camels on which a hide was loaded. Jialan asked if they had arrived and the skins to exchange for water were in order. Mengtai replied, "Don't worry, chief. They delivered everything safely." Lin looked out and looked around and said, "Where's Manfei? Didn't she move out with you?" The guy said that Manfei said that she had a friend in Azit that she wanted to meet, so she left. Once they reached the city, Linhe worriedly asked, "Friend, Jialan, does he know him?" The guy replied that he didn't. At this time in Izet, Lei Si was in Sita's palace. He changed a lot. Apparently he was warmly welcomed in Izet. Lei Si replied that yes, thank her for guiding him to this path. If it wasn't for her guidance, he wouldn't have been able to live the life he has now. Iseth is much better than Miley, no need to worry, and plenty of water supplies. And there are plenty of girls willing to court him too. Manfei said then, he couldn't arrange for her to meet Sita. She would want him to help her deal with Linai. The girl thought that if she could join Sita's entourage, she wouldn't have to suffer in Malia anymore. Lei Si took Manfei to Sito's house. When they arrived, Sito asked, "Did he bring you a woman?" Lei Si replied, "Yes, dear Lord Sita." Sita asked if this was the beautiful woman he wanted him to meet. A guy named Sita with a bare torso sat surrounded by two young girls. Lei Si bowed and said, "Yes, Lord Sita, this is Manfei, the daughter of the previous chief of Mylia that he told you about." Manfei noticed that that male was looking at her like that. Annoyingly, her heart only belongs to Jialan's brother. Manfei said, "Lei Si should probably have already told you about Lina, the rain goddess. She thinks Lord Sita would be interested in her too. She is just now in Izet, and hopes that you, Lord Sita, will send someone to capture her as soon as possible." Sita stood up and approached Manfei. He said, "Naturally, he will capture this rain goddess, but there's no need to be in such a hurry." Coming very close to Manfei, the guy said, "What a beauty. No wonder Lei Si turned his life upside down for her." Sita asked Lei Si if he was okay with him taking her for himself. Lei Si laughed and said, "Of course he doesn't mind. He brought her here just for you, Lord Sita." Manfei indignantly said that this was what he was trying to do, waving his hand away. She is a noble woman of the Miley tribe, and they would have executed him for such a thing. Sita said she would soon find out what he was trying to do. Now they are in Izet, and here he is God. Those who don't realize this must be punished. The boy pressed down hard on Manfei and kissed her against her will. Manfei began to shout, "No, now, let her go, don't Brother Jialan, help!" But Sita continued to hug and kiss Manfei. At this very moment, Linghe and Jialan are sitting on the shore of the lake. They dipped their feet into the lake to cool down a bit. Meng Tai said that they were able to get quite a lot of water this time. They won't have to worry about the water supply anymore. They will go first to visit. You and the goddess can stay in Izet for a while longer. Linnae turned her head and saw a guy from the bazaar walking nearby, with a bunch of guards around him. She thought, that's the same guy. He brought so many people with him. Jialan jumped up and said that he would distract them, and Meng Tai should get Linhei away from Izet. They would meet outside the city. Linhei asked Jialan to be careful after all. This was their territory. Jialan walked over to Lina and told her not to worry about him. Just be smart and wait for him to come back. Jialan said, "Look for him." The market owner didn't come alone, but with guards. He said that this Jialan was not even afraid of death. Pointing his finger at Jialan, the market owner said to grab him and present him to Lord Sita. The two guards thrust their spears towards Jialan, but the guy wasn't going to give up. He pulled out his small knife from behind his belt and said, "Let's see if they have the strength to fight me with this knife." He broke one spear at once. Jialan had beaten all the guards. He managed to fight everyone and everyone lost. There is only one market owner left. He shouts at Jialan that he wouldn't dare to touch him. But Jialan had no intention of listening to him at all and ran towards him. Jialan ran up to the market owner and thrust his knife right into his throat. But the guy said that his sister Manfei was in the hands of Lord Sita, and if he killed him, she would die too. Showing one green bead, he said. This one was around her neck, he's not lying. Jialan told that little rascal to get up. He will take him to Sita. Outside Eze stands a caravan of camels with water loaded on them. Nearby, Linhei stands and looks out, worried about Jialan. The girl is very worried and anxious about him, wondering why he is still missing. Suddenly she heard footsteps behind her, turned around and exclaimed, "Jialan!" However, it was not him standing in front of her. She shouted, "Lacey, how did you get here?" Lacey smiled and said, "It's been a long time, Lane." They were taken to Sita's palace and thrown into the dungeon. There was already a guy sitting in the dungeon. He said he remembered her, Lena. He thought she'd already left Iset, and she'd been caught too. Line looked up and saw the guy. She asked if it was the same guy who was selling diamonds at the bazaar. The guy sat down next to Linai and said his name was Zhao Zion. She asked where the guy who was next to her in the bazaar was. Linnae said it was a long story. Linnae sat down and wondered, not even knowing how Zhao Zion was doing. She hoped he was all right. Zhao Zion tapped his finger on Lena's shoulder and told her not to be afraid. No guards here at night, always fall asleep. He'll revert to animal form, get out of here and fetch the knife. He's gonna get her out. Line asked, "What does he turn into?" The boy replied, "A white-tailed jay." The girl stood up and thought for a moment. That's right. The jays are very small and could just fly out of here. However, while she was brought in here, she was able to notice how heavily guarded this dungeon is. Even if she escapes from the dungeon itself, she's bound to be captured. Looking around, Linnae saw that there were cacti growing here. An idea immediately came to her. This is it. It's risky, of course, but she owes it to herself to try. Lean walked over to the cactus, pulled a few needles off of it, and said, "All done." The guy sitting with her in the dungeon asked, "What is it?" or didn't answer. It's the prickles of a cactus soaked in the juice of the white durian flower. It has soporific and hallucinogenic properties. Fortunately, the local guards aren't good at this at all, so they didn't take away what she had managed to gather on the way. Lena said, "Look!" She pulled her hand out of the bars and pointed it toward the guard next to her, who was already dozing off. Then I flicked my finger so that the needles flew off my hand and flew toward the neck of the guard. He woke up, of course, but didn't realize what it was. Not a few seconds later, the guy just fell to the ground, nose down. Zhao Zion saw and said, "Wow, he collapsed on the ground. Now they can think of something to do next." At this very moment, two guards are walking down the street of Azet's palace. One says, I heard that Lord Shido presented a beauty from Malaya today. It seems it was the daughter of the former chief of Malaya. And the other guard says, I'm sure Lord Sito is enjoying her right now. So envious. And not far away from those guards, Lina and Zhao Zion peek out from around the corner. The guys managed to get out of the dungeon and had already made it as far as the exit. Liane heard, the daughter of the former chief of Malaya. Are they talking about Manfei? How did she get into Sito's hands in the first place? Everything made sense to Lina now. It was probably because of this situation that Jialan didn't return on time either. Zhao Zian said to the girl, look, there's a hole in the wall. The guards don't even seem to be looking that way. Come on, let's get out of here. Lina realized she couldn't go and told Zion that he would have to go alone. She has more things to do here. She realized that Manfei had done some nasty things to her, but she's still Jialan's sister, so she should help her. Besides, he's probably there too, the boy asked. Is she going to go rescue that girl from Malaya that the guards were talking about? When he goes with her, the more people, the better chance of success. Zion said he's certainly not as strong as her boyfriend, but if someone wanted to hurt her, he'd turn into a bird and look their eyes. Linae said, thank you so much, Zion, for not abandoning her in such a situation. And the boys began to sneak gradually, from corner to corner, into the inside of the castle to find Manfei. After half an hour, the guys were so tired that they just didn't have the energy anymore. Lina said that this palace was just huge. How could anyone find someone here? They had already gone all the way around? Lean leaned against the pillar and began to get angry at the fact that this Sito was definitely a scumbag. A scumbag, just an unbelievable scumbag. Zion said, yes, there have always been a great many females near him. He culls them and makes his own against their will. Linae decided to open the last door of despair because she no longer knew where else Manfei could be found. When they opened the door, they saw a terrible thing. There were a great many girls in this large room. They were all tied with thorny branches to poles, some by their hands, some by their necks. One of the girls who could still understand something said, you've been captured by the Shido too. Couldn't they help them? Shido is a terrible monster that imprisoned them here. Lina said, of course, that she would save them, and began to cut those thorny branches. It's a good thing they stumbled upon them and rescued them from captivity. She really hoped the guards wouldn't notice them and they could escape. Zion called out to Lina and said, look, this is the last room on this floor. One of the girls came up and thanked Lina, saying thank you for saving them. But this floor is guarded by all the girls that Civ kidnapped. If the one you're looking for isn't there, he's probably already tortured her to death. Linae thought that she would really hope that Manfei was still alive. They went to the door and opened it slightly so they could escape. On the big bed, they saw the Civ and Manfei. The girl screamed that she would kill him. Linae saw that the Manfei was completely in this guy's arms and she didn't know how to distract him. Sita said if she wants to kill him so badly, let her get up and kill him. The guy kissed the girl to cover her mouth. Suddenly, Sita felt a slight pain in his neck. It was Lina. She decided to try the cactus idea, but wasn't sure if it would work. The Civ rose up and shouted who it was who dared to harm him. Turning around, he saw. Of the standing guy and girl, Linae waved her dagger and shouted, let Manfei go. Manfei turned around and saw Lina. She thought, is she really trying to save her? No, she must be happy to see her in this state. Sito stood up and headed towards Lina, saying, and this is it. This is the rain goddess. Lina pulled out 2 needles from her neck. He threw them away and went on to say that he wanted to try her out already after enjoying Manfei, but changed his mind. Lina looked at him and wondered why the juice didn't work on him. Hitting the guy, Lina threw him back a few meters. Then she turned around and shouted, Zion! After that, Sito walked over to Lina and said that she and Manfei could now serve him together. He was sure it would be fun. The guy tried to stroke her face, but Lina shouted, wouldn't dream of it! She grabbed her small dagger and swung it at Sito. The guy intercepted his hand and said, Manfei was also rude at first, but look how submissive she is now. Sito moved a little closer to Lina to kiss her. The girl was very frightened. He told her that he also advised her to be more obedient. Then he promised that she would not get hurt. Lina was very lucky. At this moment, Jialan in his beastly lion form burst into the room. He was, of course, all scratched up. The guy yelled to get his filthy hands off his woman and grabbed Sito with his paw. They jumped away from Lina's side. Lina noticed that the guy had bleeding wounds all over his body. What had he been through? Sito, lying on the floor, smiled and asked how his old friend was doing, and he never ceased to amaze. Even his torture chamber, which he had so carefully built, couldn't keep him away. Jialan turned around and shouted for Manfei to run instead of standing in a pillar. Manfei simply froze. She slowly managed to put her clothes back on and was at a loss as to what to do. Jialan shouted to Lina to run away from here too, because a fight was about to start and they might get hurt. The girls started to run out of that room, and Lei Si came out to meet them. The boy began to say, "Lord Sita." Lei Si was not alone, but with guards. Sito shouted the guy just in time to grab them all and keep them from escaping. He needed them alive. Lei Si walked up to Manfei and said that she looked shabby. He thought she was a very proud female. She'd been taking advantage of what he liked all along, even made him take all the blame and leave his house. She's the only one to blame for what's happening to her now. Stroking her face, he said, "Though her heart is darker than night, the gods have not harmed her appearance." As soon as Lord Shido had had enough of playing with her, he would reluctantly take her in. Their conversation was interrupted by Lina. She stood in front of Manfei and said, "Screw him! Does he think he's allowed to treat women like that?" Lei Si laughed. "I licked my hand," he said, and decided that she had decided to stand up for Manfei. What a stupid female she is. She was the one who asked me to attack her, after all. Lina said that naturally she already knew that, so it was up to her to decide what punishment would have to be taken. It's not for him to decide. She went on to say that many women simply cannot physically withstand the onslaught of a man. That's why it's so important for them to support and protect each other. Right now, she is not protecting Manfei, but a woman who is being abused. Lei Si shouted that then she too would have to favor first Lord Saita and then him, and began to reach out to grab her hand. Suddenly a first aid kit appeared, which turned out to be Xion. He shouted that he wouldn't let it hurt Lina. The bird attacked his head and started pecking, thus preventing him from taking Lina. At this moment, Lei Si came to Sita's rescue. His animal form was a dragon. He grabbed Xion. To the other guards he shouted for them to grab the females. Sita the dragon took Xion with his paw and started shoving him into his mouth himself, saying that he would just eat this little creature that didn't know what it was doing. The guards had already grabbed the girls. Lina shouted to Xion. She wondered what to do, how she could save him. Suddenly, Lina's Da-Dan, an inexhaustible little system, appeared. She squeaked that friendly reminder. Her thunderstorm skill had already rolled back. Lina yelled that she wanted to use her thunderstorm skill right away and needed to hit Shido to keep him from hurting Xion. Da-Dan said that's not how skills work. She wouldn't be able to use thunderstorm just by shouting the word. Lina wondered. There was no one to kiss, except the guards who had captured them. Oh right. Last time the skill had worked because of her imagination. Lina began to imagine her and Jialan alone together, and she asks if his wounds hurt badly and kisses his neck. It worked. Lina shouted, "Yeah, there's going to be lightning!" The girl thought how good it was that no one would ever know what was going on in her head at that moment. It's so embarrassing. The most important thing is that there was a result. Lightning appeared from the sky and struck Shido. From that impact, he let go of Xion and fell down himself. He asked what was wrong, why there was suddenly a thunderstorm if the sky was clear. In addition to the thunderstorm, a lot of arrows flew from somewhere. These arrows pierced the guards. Lina turned around and saw the girls she had saved. She asked why they were here. Shouldn't they have escaped by now? But the girls replied that they were very grateful to her for saving them. So now it was their turn to save her. The fairy girls came at her, many of them helped by Lina. They all had bows and arrows, and they just pelted the guards with them. Lina ran and picked up Xion. She looked over. He was still breathing. The girl said how glad she was that he was okay. While Lina was distracted by Xion, she missed Lei Si's raven attack. When she turned to look at her Jialan, she saw that Lei Si had taken a bite out of Jialan's paw. The girl looked at her lightning bolt and realized she couldn't use it that way, but she remembered that there was another way to help Jialan. She shouted to him to attack from the back. The eagle needs to pull his feathers from his back. That's his weak point. The eagle didn't understand how she knew about his weakness. Jialan thought that this was his chance, and one should do as Lina said. He attacked the eagle from the back and chewed off a bunch of feathers. It really worked. The girls who escaped with Lina's help grabbed her arm and told her that you can't stay here. You have to run. Running away, Lena shouted to Jialan, "Come on, hurry up and join us." And they all ran out of that castle, all together. Downstairs on the street, Meng Tai was waiting for them. Shouldn't he have returned to Milia by now? Lena thought as Lei Si came after them. He only grabbed her for the sake of his family and the rest of the tribe. He let the others go with the water to Milia. Meng Tai said that although he couldn't protect them, he couldn't just go home. The others also went to Milia, only to return with help. Jialan walked out of the castle and lay on the ground with many wounds. He had no strength at all, not even to move. Lena examined him. He had a few deep wounds, but thankfully they weren't fatal. She realized that Sita was in no condition to chase them right now either. So let's find somewhere safe and get some rest. Later they found an abandoned building in the desert. They moved Jialan there so they could take care of him. Linhei is now applying medicine to his wounds. She said it's good that she found such useful herbs here. It's sea buckthorn. Apparently that promotes wound healing and is particularly good. Line didn't have time to finish her sentence before she saw Jialan regaining consciousness. She thought that she had hurt him, but no. He was the one who had just regained consciousness. She figured she'd get it over with quickly then. He'd have to be patient for a while. The boy opened his eyes when he saw her. He stroked her head, saying, "Lena." The girl replied, yes, it was her. They were safe now. Maybe he shouldn't worry. Line asked, "By the way, what happened when they left? Why did he burst into the palace all wounded?" The boy began to say that when he learned that Sita had kidnapped Man Fei, he immediately rushed to her aid. However, they had thought of everything and trapped him. When he broke out of the trap and broke into their hall, he saw her, Lin. The girl said, "Oh, so he came to rescue Man Fei, and she's just along for the ride." She was defiantly offended. Jialan began to explain that no, it's not like that. Sure, she was very important to him, but Man Fei's father had saved and raised him as his own son. He couldn't just sit idly by knowing that she had been kidnapped. Lena said, "Okay, she was just kidding. She really isn't mad at him, but she's glad he's still so energetic." She said that Sita kidnapped Man Fei. It was only natural for him to come to her rescue. After all, she understands that. She did it herself. At this time, Man Fei sat on the outskirts of the building and reflected on the fact that she had set Lena up so many times, and she still came to her rescue. The other captives had told her that she had gone all around Sita's palace to find her. Why was she trying to save her? Lina sat up as it suddenly began to smell very good. She sniffed and remembered that she had set the meat to cook. Screaming that the meat was ready, she ran to inform the others. When she saw Man Fei, she told the girl to go eat with them and called the others over. Man Fei didn't change anything. She said who did she think she was? Giving out orders, but she went to call the others. All the guys are gathered around the fire eating the delicious meat that Lin has cooked. Meng Tai said, "Goddess, your barbecue came out very tasty." Lena said that was nothing. If she had seasonings, she could marinate the meat in advance. When they got back, she would try to look for some seasoning. Line noticed that Jialan was sad. She decided to dispel his sadness with a conversation. The girl said, incidentally, while he was not with them, she heard something. To summarize, she had heard from the boys that there was a large rift valley to the southwest. Maybe they could find a new water source there. Jialan said that's right, there is such a valley in the southwest, but he hasn't had time to explore it properly yet. But if she says so, they can go look for it. If they can still find water there, it will not only save Malia, but also the entire western part of the desert. Lena smiled and thought that she didn't know what was bothering Jialan so much, but she was glad that she was able to cheer him up at least a little. A few days later, Jialan said that the Rift Valley was a rather dangerous place, so he and Linhei would go to explore it. The others would return to Malia. Meng Tai replied, "Very well, Chief. He will deliver Man Fei safely back to Malia." Man Fei said, "Don't be deceived, Jialan is only staying with her for a while. When you return, he will become her brother again." Linhei replied, "Of course, girl. After all, he is her brother and will remain her brother." Everyone went on their way, but only Man Fei continued to resent Linhei for coming to her rescue. But she was convinced that she was a nasty girl and hated her. Meng Tai said to conserve their strength. They still had a long way to go and needed to take it easy like this. Zhao Zian said that it was time for him to return as well, as he had been away from home for too long. Not knowing if they would ever see each other again after this parting, he asked to hug her goodbye. Line herself threw herself into his arms and said of course they would see each other again and he could come and visit her in Melia. She would always be welcome. And if he does, bring plenty of diamonds with you. The guy said okay, and Liane thought they should definitely meet again. Zhao Zian turned into a bird and flew away. Lin waved her hand at him and shouted, "Bye!" thanking him for his help. Then Lin turned to Jialan and said, "Let's hug too." But the guy stood with his arms folded at his sides and pouted, fuming. "What about us?" she asked. "What's wrong?" Then she thought that suddenly he was in pain, so she started groping and examining him. Jialan said that everything was fine. It had already been a few days, and he had almost recovered. Suddenly, the guy said he wanted one too. Line asked, "What do you want?" Jialan pulled her hand, pulled her close to him, and whispered in her ear that he wanted to hug her too. Lin laughed and realized he was just jealous of her. "That's so sweet." Finally, they came to the right place. Jialan said, "Look, Lin, there's water there." Jialan asked in surprise, "Has it really rained a lot? But why are there so many puddles here?" Lin explained to him that they weren't puddles. She picked up a stone and threw it into one of them, then rubbed her chin, thinking that it was just as she had thought, there into a desolate swamp. Jialan asked, "What is a desolate swamp?" "In this area, groundwater runs underground, which is why the swamp is formed. To put it simply, there is water under a small layer of sand. However, if you get in, the wet sand makes it very difficult to get out." Jialan said, "That's why the stone just sank into the sand and we can collect water from this swamp." Lin said, "Yes, but it's not necessary since groundwater runs through here. There should be a river a little farther away. They need to go through this swamp." Jialan, taking Lina by the hand, said to be careful, choosing harder ground and not stepping on soft ground. The guy took a stick and tapping in front of him, they walked step by step very slowly. The next thing that caught up with them was the noxious smoke. The boy asked Lina to cover his nose. He had encountered such smoke before while hunting. Line said, "It's poisonous fumes. We have to get out of here." But she thought, in the middle of the swamp, there was no point in going back. They could only speed up and leave their lives to the will of the heavens. Half an hour later they finally made it out, but Lin was very dizzy. She turned to Jialan and said that there was a forest ahead, but noticed that the guy had gotten worse. She sat him down, leaning against a rocky stone, and thought, although he looked healthy, his body still hadn't recovered. It's hard for him to resist the effects of the poisonous fumes. Near such fumes, there are almost always herbs with an antidote. We should look in the woods, she thought. After kissing Jialan, she told him in his ear to wait for her here. She would be back soon. The girl went into the forest to look for some useful herbs to help Jialan a little. Not far away, she had already found some. Now she should return to Jialan's place as soon as possible. Line heard strange sounds behind her, such as hissing. She turned around without even getting up, and she saw a huge viper in front of her. It seemed to her that it was about to bite her. There was a loud scream from Lina. She wasn't ready to die, not even from a python. The girl fell to the ground and started begging she didn't know this was his territory. She was just looking for herbs here. Please spare her. She didn't mean to hurt him. But the python wasn't going to eat her. He hissed. Sss. It looked like it was asking for something. Noticing that he looked weakened, Lene didn't yet understand what made him like that. He didn't pounce on her, just hissed. When the girl examined him better, she saw that his skin was stuck on him. Apparently he had been like this for a long time and was tormented by it. His tail was hanging down from the tree, and you could see that there was old, already dry skin hanging on the remnants of his tail. Lean turned to Mr. Python with the words, "Let's make a deal. I'll help him remove the old skin, and he'll let me go, okay?" Lean explained to him that he had to trust her, she knew how to do it. But the python turned its head away, as if it was ignoring her, though it realized itself that it couldn't do it alone. It needed help. Lanai walked over to the tree, yanked on its tail so it would come down from the branch and you could get a good look at it. The girl wondered. The python looked so displeased, and he stuck out his tail with his old skin. He was so hard to understand. Well, if it would let her escape from here, that was okay. She'd put up with it somehow. Lean began to explain to the python what had happened to him. saying that his tail had gotten stuck during the molt because the surface had gotten too dry. She poured water between his tail and his old skin, but she didn't have much left. But she would still try to help him get that old skin off. As it turned out, the glass of water she had wasn't enough. The girl began to think, twisting her head around and looking for a place to get water. She thought that if she made a hole in the bottle tree, she could get water. Lene remembered that she definitely thought she had seen a bottle tree somewhere around here. There must be enough water in that tree to soften the python's skin. The girl walked far in the neighborhood looking for this tree as she suddenly found it. She was very happy that she could help the python. 20 minutes later, while she was chiseling that tree to get water to come out of it, the python crawled to that water, lay down in it, and waited for its tail to oxidize. Lean walked over and grabbed his old skin and told him that she would support her, and he should try to break free of her. Python and Line tried together, and together they succeeded. Python was able to break out of his old skin by wiggling his body left and right. The girl became very excited, saying, "You got it, Mr. Python!" He did an excellent job. Once the python was free of its old skin, it was easily able to transform back into a human and appear completely naked in front of Line. She was horrified by what she saw. She thought she was used to the fact that the inhabitants of this world could take the form of animals and humans, but it turned out that she was not. It was too sudden when he appeared in human form, completely unclothed, but she thought she had to admit, this python is pretty beautiful. She also yelled out, "I'm sorry!" She didn't mean it on purpose and covered her eyes with her hands. The python guy came up to her and said, "Why is she covering her eyes with her hands? Is she afraid he's going to eat her?" The guy assured the girl not to worry. He wasn't interested in wimps. He inquired as to her name. The girl replied that she was Ling Minyue, and what was his name? The guy snorted under his breath and said something that weaklings were not worthy of knowing his name. Lene thought, wow, he thinks he's such a hero, and he himself couldn't even get out of his tail of old skin. The guy looked obliquely at the girl and said that since she wanted to know so badly, he would tell her, even though she didn't want to. His name was EYU, which translated means midnight feather. Looking at the guy, I realized that he was really very hard to understand. She said he doesn't like to be in debt to anyone. She helped him so she can ask him for anything. For example, he can become her male and protect her for the rest of her life. Lean shouted that he didn't have to put his whole life on the line for one help. The guy asked in surprise, "She doesn't want to?" He of course made a suggestion. Perhaps she already had a male and he was so jealous that he wasn't willing to share her with others. I immediately thought of Jialan. She wondered why Jialan was in her head at a time like this. The girl started shaking her head left to right to regain her senses a bit and scolded herself for thinking about it. Enough! Lena said she didn't need anything. She helped him for nothing. Well, since they've totally worked it out, she'll go. She has urgent business to attend to. EYU grabbed her arm and said no, and if he says he will repay, he means he will. There are many dangerous beasts here, so he'll at least guide her to where she needs to go. The girl thought, what am I supposed to do now? I just saved some python on my head. Finally, they came to Jialan's house. The girl crouched on his lap to make it easier to give him a drink of the medicine she had made from herbs. Making a small drinker from a lily leaf, she poured the medicine into it and brought it to the boy's mouth to drink. AY said he was her male. He was waiting for her to help him. So helpless. Why would she want such a weak male? The boy looked at him with a judgmental look. Linghe indignantly said that Jialan was not weak. He had only recently recovered from the severe wounds he received in battle, and then inhaled the poisonous fumes. That's also why he's unconscious right now. EJ noticed that she was so protective of him. She must really like him a lot. Lene thought for a moment. Protecting him. Perhaps she really likes Jialan. However, she doesn't belong in this world, and she's destined to leave here. So, what's the point of her falling in love with someone here? Either her medicine was working, or he was just resting. But the boy began to regain consciousness, slowly opening his eyes. Lene joyfully but also worriedly exclaimed at the same time, Jialan, is he awake? How is he feeling? The girl hugged him and said she was very glad he was okay. The boy hugged her too. He said in a slightly guilty voice that he was sorry. He promised to protect her, and he lay down and passed out. Lean said he shouldn't blame himself. He handled everything well with a pat on his shoulder. She wasn't a little girl after all. and no flower there to be constantly protected. EYU not to interrupt their conversation, so not at the beginning that he's still standing here. Jialan immediately stared at the guy with a question in his eyes. The guy immediately covered his hand and asked who the hell he was and what he was doing here. EYU told the guy in a confident voice that he was too weak to know his name. The atmosphere got heated between the two guys. Linai stood there boiling because she was angry that all the time Jialan was jealous of her with every guy. The boys began to grind their teeth and get even angrier at each other. A spark of anger flew between them. Linai shouted, "Hey, calm down! They're both her friends after all, so there's no need for them to fight here. They're all in the same boat after all, so they should take care of each other." Jialan grabbed the girl's hand, pulled her towards him and said that he was not just her friend, but a male. "And this guy is a stranger in general," Yeyu repeated, grabbing Lena's hand. "He said if he can't even protect her, what kind of male is he? He's not fit for that role." Lena ends up standing in the middle, each of the guys pulling her by the arm and yelling. One shouts to Lena, the other shouts, "Yes!" And she knows it, and just stands there wondering when it's all going to end. Finally, the girl couldn't take it anymore and yelled at them, "Enough! If they keep pulling her in different directions, she'll turn away from both of them." Jialan said, "All right, Lane, he'll try to get along with him." In response, Yeyu replied to the guy, "Well, since she's asking so much, then so be it. He'll try to get along with that weakling." Line took their hands, joined them together, and said, "That's good. There should be the water source they were looking for up ahead. So let's go there together and check it out." The boys traveled quite a distance to find the place they were looking for, and finally reaching the coveted one, the splendor is revealed to them. It is a waterfall after all, just magical. And what a beautiful view unfolded before my eyes at the waterfall. All around, the shine of the blue lake drowned in the green of the trees. Jialan said in delight that they had indeed discovered the spring. He was amazed too. He didn't know that such magic could be discovered here, not far from his place where he lived. Lena told Jialan that she hadn't bathed for a few days, so she would like to bathe there. The guy replied, "Sure, she can go swimming, as long as she needs to, and he'll keep an eye on it." Yeyu said, "No, he'll look after her." Line walked towards the waterfall and thought about leaving them alone at all. It didn't matter. She just wanted to swim and cheer herself up. Line moved a little farther away so they wouldn't stand staring intently at her and took off her things, placing them on a rock near the shore. The girl went down into the water. She was delighted, saying, "The water is so refreshing, beautiful." Lean splashed around like a child. Her hair developed in the water. She poured this water on her hands, her head, washed herself. The boys stood on the shore and sulked at each other, saying nothing. They were watching Lena closely, as suddenly, unexpectedly, they were discovered, showed up on the horizon, and its hooves. He said, "I didn't expect to meet any strangers here." Jialan saw a whole flock of mountain goats. He asked, "Who the hell are they?" One of them replied, "This is their territory, and all males who set foot in their territory must serve their chief. Go ahead and grab them, boys, and take them to the chief." He gave the order, obviously the leader of this enclosure, and these goats ran right at the guys. There were so many of them, the guys didn't know how to fight them. Meanwhile, she was splashing in the water. She did not hear anything, neither conversations nor noise, because the waterfall drowned it all out. Beautiful lines of words from a song came to her mind from the beauty she saw. The girl, splashing, hummed, "Mountains connected by the ridges of Umeng, and moonlight falls on the beach of Xiangshui. No one will tell you about it, but the heavens are calling you." While Line was splashing in the water, a young boy noticed her. He heard her as he came closer to the rocks, and he saw her clothes, saying they were women's clothes. Did some female wander into the sacred spring by mistake? Linnae was already thinking of going out as well, turning to her things. She saw some guy, her body with her hands. She turned her back to him. The young guy saw Lean and thought, "How beautiful she is. He hasn't seen girls like that yet." Lean shouted to the guy, to which he stared at, "Get out of here! If he doesn't leave right now, she's going to call someone for help." The guy said she's bathing in a sacred spring. They're not in the tribe, so she dares him to kick him out of here. Wants to call someone? Yes, please. Except he'll be calling a lot more tribesmen. Looking at the girl, he said, "But as she is very beautiful, he may ask his sister to have mercy on her." The boy stretched out his hand toward her. Line shouted, "Don't go near her!" and started calling Jialan and Ye to her urgently. "Go to help! She's being harassed by some strange guy!" The stranger guy shouted, "Hey, hurry up and get out of there! It's dangerous in the water!" But at that moment the girl went underwater. Jialan and Yeyu were returning just after they had interrupted a whole troop of mountain goats. Yeyu said that he didn't think that Jialan was a bit stronger than he thought. Jialan also said, yeah, he didn't think the same about Yeyu. As the guys were walking along, complimenting each other, they heard Line yelling that someone had approached her and was harassing her. As they approached the place where Lin was entering the water, they saw some young fellow. He was leaning over the rocks and doing something in the water. Jialan ran up and grabbed this guy by the neck, shouting, "Where's his Linhei? What did he do to her?" But the guy shouted, "Vividly let him go. He that has had enough of living, he doesn't know who this guy is." While Jialan was trying to figure out what kind of guy was peeping at Line, Yeyu turned into a python and flashed into the water to pull Line out of there. The girl shouted, "Close all your eyes! Don't look at her!" because she was completely naked and ashamed. As soon as the girl was pulled out of the water, Jialan immediately ran over to cover her and threw the guy he was torturing into the water. Lina immediately ran up to Jialan to have him cover her with him. The guy told her not to worry. He threw that rascal into the water. The girl said, "Thank you," and cuddled up to him, while Line turned away to put on her clothes. At this moment, Jialan said that if she wanted the guy to pay for his act, and who? Just letting him in, he will make him regret it. Lin looked at the guy, smiling at him because when he's embarrassed, he's so cute. A stranger who had been thrown into the water began shouting, "Help! He can't swim!" He hit the water with his hands and shouted as hard as he could. Jialan retorted, "How dare he ask for help after daring to offend his female," and throwing a stone that hit him on the head. The guy was seriously drowning. He was almost all the way under the water. One arm was left up, and a crocodile showed up near the guy. Line noticed, saying, "It's a crocodile." She thought, "It's huge." The girl ran up to Yeyu's python and said, "There's a crocodile in there. He's definitely going to kill that guy. Even though he was rude to her, he still didn't deserve to die. Please get him out of the water." EU replied as it annoyed him. Python crawled into the water to save the guy Lean had asked for. The guy was still able to swim to the surface for a breath of air, but the crocodile was already behind him and had already opened its jaws to devour him. At that moment, when the crocodile opened its jaws, the python hit it on the head with its tail, thus stunning the crocodile a little. The python pulled the boy out, setting his body up for him. The boy clutched at him, lay on top of him, wrapped his arms and legs around him, and cried. He thought he was going to die, he said. Before the python could get out of the water, it was surrounded by a whole group of crocodiles. They were about to attack the python. Line shouted, "Yeah, you, watch out!" The girl wondered how there were so many crocodiles in such a small body of water. The guy who was holding on to the python started screaming. "I thought he said it was very dangerous in the water. This is the end. They're all going to die. They're definitely going to die." The python told him to shut up already. He was just setting himself up for battle. Lena was very frightened. She thought about what to do. There are too many of those crocodiles out there, and if things continue like this, Yeyu and this guy will die. Although Jialan is a very experienced fighter, but he only knows how to fight on land. He doesn't think he will be of any use in the water. The girl began to think. We need to calm down. If they can't crush them by force, then we need to take them by stealth. These crocodiles are very similar to the Nile crocodiles. What are their weaknesses? And then suddenly, Linné remembered. That's right, you have to hit them in the eyes. That's their weak spot. The girl was just about to run up and say this to her, when she looked up and saw stone doves in the sky. Stone doves and Nile crocodiles are an example of symbiosis. If they can find the nest of these doves, they will find the nest of these crocodiles. Lena realized that there was another way to save you and this guy. She ran up to Jialan and told him that she needed his help. Lene asked Jialan to turn into a lion. She rode him and they rode off. Lin pointed her finger and said, "They need to go after those birds over there, along with their nest. They will find the nest of those crocodiles, just about the time they're laying their eggs, so they can take their egg and threaten those crocodiles." The birds began to descend, so the nest must be here somewhere. She went down to the ground and looked for it. The girl suggested that they split up so that they could find the crocodile eggs as soon as possible. There were too many crocodiles in that pond, so they shouldn't meet them here. Jialan replied, "Okay, but what does a crocodile nest look like?" The girl began to explain to him that there must be a lot of dry grass and branches near the nest. Also, crocodiles usually hide their eggs somewhere on hills. The boy replied, "Got it." It literally took a few minutes for Jialan to discover these eggs that Linai had told him about. Jialan shouted, "There are many eggs lying in the branches near the hillock, just like the girl said." Lin came running at once, taking one egg. Taking it very carefully, she looked at it carefully and said, "These are just what they need. Come on, hurry up and save her." At this point, there was a fight going on at the lake. The python was trying to fight off several crocodiles and was waiting for someone to come to his aid. He thought, "Oh shit, he's already starting to run out of steam. Why aren't these crocodiles getting smaller at all?" There was a shout from Linai. "Yeyu, they're back!" The guy who was sitting on the python also shouted to Linai with tears in his eyes. He was very scared and thought they had been abandoned. Line raised her hand up, which had a huge egg in it, and shouted, "Hey crocodiles, get out of here! Otherwise she'll break your eggs! Make way now!" The crocodiles, having seen their eggs, all lined up in a single pile, exactly in the direction where Lin was. The girl threw those eggs at them in the water and yelled, "Go Pikachu!" hoping her plan would work. The crocodiles immediately rushed to them for their cubs, which were still in their eggs for the time being, and forgot for the fact that they were there hunting for someone in the water. Yeyu and the boy climbed calmly out of the water and ran away from the lake, both wet, and the boy was scared. Lin asked him if everything was okay. The guy said very haughtily that a couple of crocodiles wouldn't do anything to him. She didn't help him further. He would have straightened them out sooner or later. Pointing to the crocodiles in the lake, the boy shouted, "Look! They're swimming here again! Run! Hurry!" The boy decides to take his new friends to his settlement. He said, "Hurry up and follow him. He will take you to a safe place." Everyone went up the mountain, a rocky area that was much farther away from that waterfall. Here by these rocks lived the Isika tribe. When they arrived, the boy pointed with his hand toward the rocky mountains where his Isika tribe had settled, and he resided there with them. Despite the fact that they first threw him in the water and then he was almost eaten by crocodiles, he would allow them to enter their land. He would never forgive them if it weren't for one but. Sister Lena wouldn't sing along to help. She was really beautiful. He really liked her a lot, sister. The boy said they could stay with them as long as they wanted. Holding out his hand, he said, "Sister, he invites you to visit the tribe as guests." But this did not please Jialan and Yeyu. They stood in front of Linai and blocked her with their hands, which meant that she would not go, only with them. A man's voice rang out. The boy said, "Assistant Chief." It was those males, and he pointed his finger at them. A crowd of people approached the boys, including a beautiful girl, and the rest were young boys. One of the guys, the leader, began to say that first they had shot them down, and now they were coming right here demanding justice. Jialan and Yeyu began to say that they didn't understand who this guy was, and that this was the first time they had seen him. The guy said that they were already in denial, having forgotten how they had been beaten up at the waterfall today. Jialan asked in a surprised voice, "So, were they the ones who were there?" Yeyu asked, "Do they still want to get some? Can they arrange it?" The boy shouted, She heard, she heard. They admitted it themselves, the assistant chief. They must bring justice." The boy came up and said, "Anti-deputy, there seems to be some misunderstanding. These are his friends, and he invited them to be his guests." And the aide started yelling at the boy, saying that he should realize what he had done and what his friends had done. It seems that the chief had been too lenient with him all this time. He didn't even think of his people and sided with their enemy. Besides yelling at him, she also slapped him, slapping that boy. The girl continued to shout, saying, "Capture these people! They need to get justice and avenge their people who were hurt." Linnae stood there and was shocked. Wasn't she exaggerating too much? How did they become enemies before they even knew each other? As a result, the guys from the Isika tribe ran towards Jialan and Yeyu and Lena to capture them as ordered by their assistant. Lena immediately began to ponder. But they didn't come here to antagonize anyone. Is there really no way out? But afterward the girl had an idea. She said, "Oh, right!" and shouted loudly, pointing her finger. The movement of the index finger of one hand was thrust into the palm of the other. The guys who had been running to grab them on their assistant's orders stopped abruptly and stared at Lena, listening to what she was saying. Lene said loudly that they had no intentions of picking a fight with them, and held a huge bundle of grass in her hands. This here is a small token of our appreciation for your hospitality. However, if you still object to our presence, then we will simply leave. The guys who stopped saw this pile of grass. Their drool flowed and their eyes became like mesmerized. One of them said, "Oh, it looks so tender and soft. Surely this grass must be very tasty." Leanne knew that antelopes were very picky eaters, so only the juiciest, freshest grass tasted good to them. She happened to pick the best grass she could find along the way, but their leader began to shout, "Why have they stopped? Stop!" Their succulent and tasty grass didn't really bother her. There was a loud voice of a woman who said clearly, "Stop it!" Their Lord Chieftainess appeared on the horizon, with a boy standing beside her, who probably ran to tell her everything so she could settle their argument. The girl chief came up and said, "What's all the fuss about? What's going on here?" Her name was Bai Quan, the chief of the Isika tribe. Lean looked at this girl and thought, "So it's her and Horsetail. How good of the boy to run out and call her." Jialan said, "It was your tribe members who attacked them today at the waterfall. Let me ask you why." Naturally, they had to defend themselves against it. However, now she is trying to get revenge on them for her own attack. The guy who attacked near the watering hole said that they noticed the two males and thought their appearance was a bit unusual for their area, so they decided to capture them to give them to you later. However, they did not expect these guys to fight back. Chief Bai got very angry and knocked the polbu of this guy who attacked near the waterfall, calling them idiots. The woman went on to say that she heard Manchi call her line. She asked him what she was going to do and why he was so interested in her business. The female leader said, "Forgive their men. Sometimes they act too thoughtlessly. She would never harm those who saved Mon Chi-Chi's life. Let them show their hospitality and stay with us for the night." The girl helper objected to the chief, saying that they had beaten up their tribesmen, so it must be hard for her to imagine just letting them into the tribe. The female chief turned to Lin and said, "Lin, she is the assistant chief after all. Is it hard for her to understand how things are?" The chief explained that these males are not human. The men attacked them first, and after getting a couple of bruises, they wanted revenge. She emphasized that these males already have their own female, and she is not the kind of person who would steal someone else's. "So, dear guests, please follow her." And the woman led them into the tribe. Jialan asked Linhei if it looked too much like a trap. Ye Yu also expressed his concern and said that it looked like a trap. The chief assured them that everything was fine and invited them to rest. Linhei thought she really wanted to try again to believe that there was room for good people in this world. Besides, she had business with the Isaac tribe. As they headed toward the tribe, the chief told them to just call her Bai, and that she didn't need these formalities. The helper and the guy who had attacked near the waterfall were left behind. The boy asked her if they were really going to leave it like that, but the deputy said they beat him up like that. It can't be left as it is. However, now that they have become guests of their tribe, they can't act rudely and directly, but he doesn't need to worry. She already has an idea. Linnae, when she entered the cave, she thought, "Is it really that spacious?" The boy said, "Yes, their cave has a lot of very room and recesses. Each family of their tribe has its own spacious dwelling." The boy showed Lena that his dwelling was over there. They could go next door to it. No one lived there. When they arrived, a little girl ran out to meet them with the words "brother." She was wonderful. When the boy came, she threw herself on his arm and he said, "The little one is pulling. She is quite small. She has only just learned to walk." He took her in his arms and said Lena, and this was his little sister Mantian, but she could just call her little Tien. And the girl said hello, saying no. "Hello, big sister," in her little thin voice. Stroking her cheek, she said, "Hi, baby girl. Oh, she's so sweet and obedient." Jialan glared at Linai and thought that he had once again seen that Linai was very fond of babies. In the future, they would have their own babies too. Suddenly, the baby started coughing and blushing very badly. Said little Tien, "Has she started to fever again?" Feeling her forehead, he said that he needed to take her to bed immediately. Happened to little Tien, and Bai replied that she didn't know. However, many of their tribes suffer from this disease, It starts with a normal cough, and then it develops into a severe fever. Every day it just gets worse and worse. Bai went on to say that Manchichi's parents had died because of this disease. And recently, little Tian had also started coughing a lot. Lena said she knew a little about medicine and asked them to examine her, if they would let her. She thought, a strange disease that affects an entire tribe of antelope. Could it be the horse plague? The little girl was lying in her bed and was coughing very badly. It was hard for the girl, and she was also burning, and there was heat all over her body. Leon listened to her pulse, frowned, stared at the girl, groped and examined her some more. Then she began to question the boy. When did the fevers and coughing start? And did she have much contact with other residents? The boy replied that it all started about 10 days ago. No, she usually lies in the dwelling and rarely goes outside, so she only had contact with him and her older sister. The girl asked Bai Quan, had just told them that his parents had also died from this disease. She said, "Sorry, this might seem rude, but can she ask when exactly they died?" The boy said they were gone a little over a year ago, almost immediately after baby Tien came along. Linné hesitated for a moment, saying, "That's how it is." Then she began to think. It certainly looked a lot like the horse plague, but at the same time it didn't. But then why had so many people of this tribe fallen ill? Lena began wandering around the cave looking for the right medicinal herbs. As luck would have it, she found a couple of herbs that could help, telling the boy that these two plants were good for fevers and coughs. She had seen them in the surrounding forests. Man Chi would now be able to distinguish them herself and gather them if necessary. But now, she would gather them to prepare the medicine. She doesn't know exactly how to cure this disease yet, but they will definitely help alleviate the symptoms. Man Chi shouted out, "Thank you, sister!" He will go after them right away, grabbing Li Nai's hands. The guy was even crying with happiness. Bai said, "What do you mean he's going to leave on his own? He brought guests, and now he's going to run away. That's no business. He should stay here and she'll send someone to get those plants." The boy read on, scratched the back of his head, and said, "Oh, that's right. Sorry, big sister. I'll have to leave it up to her." A little while later, Man Chi picked up some fruit. When he got to the cave, he said to Sister Lena, "She must have been hungry all day. He has some fruits. You should try them. They are very tasty." Lin took the fruit in her hands and asked, "Is it a fruit?" Jialan also took one and said, "What kind of fruit is it? Such by the smell, can tell it's still fresh." And with only her folding her arms in a bokeh, he said, "They have plenty of this fruit. They call it zikiao." It dawned on Lena as lightning struck her head, that where do they pick it, this fruit? Not near the swamp by any chance? They eat it a lot. Why would she make that assumption? Because she remembered when they were walking through the swamp. She saw this fruit growing nearby. But there's poisonous fumes all over the air. Maybe this fruit has had time to be soaked in poison too. The guy smiled and said, "Yes, they pick it by the swamp. This fruit only grows there, and only in small quantities. He doesn't like it much, so he gave all the fruit to little Tien." Lin took the fruit, opened it to see what was inside, and inside it was not yellow as it should be, but already green prinus. Lena immediately began to take this fruit away from Jialan, shouting, "Sixth, you can't eat it!" The girl said that she seemed to understand what the diseases of the tribe were connected with. It was probably the fruit that caused the disease. If you eat it in small quantities, it will go unnoticed, but it is quite another thing to eat too much of it. Lena revealed that she still had the plants she had given Jialan to flush out all the toxins from her body. The girl frowned and said, "However, that's just her guess, and she's not sure if she can cure little Tian. Besides, she's still too young. She's afraid that the poison has already spread." Jialan hugged Lena and said, "In any case, they'll have to talk to their chief. Let her decide." The girl said, "Yes, he's right." Yeyu intervened in the conversation and said, "Since it is late, let's talk to her tomorrow. And now if we can't eat that fruit, let's eat fish." She gave him a fish, and one Lena guy had 2 fish hanging on a string. Lian shouted with joy. When had he managed to catch a fish, really, in the time they had been at the waterfall? Yu replied that he naturally always thinks in advance about what he will eat or where he will sleep. If she became his female, He would never let her starve or freeze. That's how a real male should be, not like some useless ones. Hearing the words, Jialan and Manchi immediately rushed to get food for Linai. One told Lina that he would go hunting, and the other sister, he will bring her something to eat. The next morning came, as planned. They told Bai everything about what Linai had been able to find out. And the girl replied, "So it's a terrible disease, could be related to the fruit they love so much. If this plant really helped, it would save many of their tribe." Bai held up the plant she had suggested to Linai to make the medicine. Linai replied that it did, but she wasn't entirely sure that the illness was related to this one. Jia Lan suggested, why don't they find someone to try out the medicine on? In his tribe, there are always sick people to test medicines on. Yes, it comes with risks. However, if it worked, many more lives would be saved. Bai replied that okay, she would try to find someone. At that moment, the guy who had gotten into a fight near the waterfall at the time looked out from around the corner of the cliff. He thought they wanted to test their medicine on someone. It looked like it wouldn't be long before they could get their revenge. Half an hour later, Bai brought the guy over and said good news. She was able to find someone who was willing to do it. The other residents were scared when they heard about some medicine, but Dubian decided to give it a try. The guy could be heard coughing as he came closer and closer. When he approached, he said that he had been sick for a long time and was afraid that he didn't have long to live. He would be glad if someone could help him to heal, or if he could help his tribe in some way. The tribe boys present started shouting to him, "Come on, Dubian, don't worry, he won't die. If they try to kill him, they won't leave here alive themselves." Some of the guys shouted that hopefully the medicine will actually work and he'll live. Line was very worried herself, but said that it was a soup that was made from herbs that flushed out the poison from the body. It would be much more effective that way. The guy replied, "Thank you." Taking a plate, he began to drink the soup. The boy brought it up to his mouth and took several large sips. As he drank, he croaked. Apparently, the herb soup didn't taste very good, after which the guy became violently ill and started coughing, choking on blood. The plate fell out of his hands and shattered, and the guy fell down bleeding. One of his tribesmen cried out. Brother leaned his head against him and said, "He told me that these three were plotting evil. What did you give his brother there? Why did he spit out so much blood? Hurry up and capture those murderers." The guys surrounded the other tribesmen in a tight circle so they couldn't escape anywhere. She didn't understand why he was vomiting blood. Had she misidentified the cause of the illness, or had her decoction only intensified the course of the true illness? She stood and ran through a bunch of options in her head. As suddenly, Lean turned her attention to the ground. She said, "Wait a minute, there's something wrong with the light of this blood. Fresh blood should be brightly colored and red, and his blood is dark." Lean said, "Let her examine the boy again. She thinks his illness might be different from the one they want to treat. This guy's older brother screamed that she's carrying on and his brother is in this state now because of her. She wants to ruin him for good. Chief, only the chief can bring justice and punish them, otherwise the chief will not be worthy to be called their chief." Jia Lan said, "If it is said that something is wrong here, then it is so." She's like, "What? Not he's about to bring it here himself and she looks can examine it." A few tribesmen ran up to them and started shouting that they wouldn't dare touch their comrade. Jialan said, "So this is how you treat your guests." Yeyu also added that if they started fighting again, they would be the only ones who would suffer here, just as they had at the waterfall. Waving the whip, the Bai chief said, "Stop this now. She will handle the matter herself and then explain everything to you." Man Chi, taking his younger sister in his arms, said, "Elder sister, there's no point in looking into this. Everything is already clear. Brothers Dulun and Dubian set this whole thing up. They are just liars." The boys who had been accused began to shout at the boy. How dare he accuse them of this when it is clear that he likes this female Line? Has he really decided to betray his tribe for the sake of this female? Seeing that little Tien had recovered, she said, "It looks like those herbs really helped relieve the symptoms." Her brother shouted, "That little Tien has not only regained consciousness, but seems to have fully recovered." The older brother said that the girl told him that today, when her sister was preparing the medicine, she secretly fell asleep afterwards and woke up already full of strength. And Lena said, Come on, she said. Let's go check it out. Walking up to the little girl, feeling her pulse, examining her ruddy cheeks, she said, Little Tien, she's definitely healthy. But one of the brothers shouted, I think they're just trying to protect the three killers. Then Jialan said that it was true or not. They would only be able to understand after Linhei examined. His boyfriend extended his hand and said, Give it here, Dubian. Suddenly one of the brothers shouted, What, is he joking? Grabbing a sick brother like that? But the brother turned out not to be sick. He stepped up with his hands in the air and said, He had nothing to do with it. His brother asked him to do it. The tribesmen began to ask in surprise, What is going on here? What have you done? Geto Linhei asked. He didn't drink her medicine, did he? Believes it was the blood of other animals that she mixed with the medicine. You made everyone believe it was vomit with blood in it, didn't you? The guy lowered his head and said she was right. Forgive him. He shouldn't have done such a vile thing. I'm sorry. Please give him more of that medicine. He's really getting worse and worse. Then the chief said to Dulong, Explain yourself now. Does he even realize that because of him, their tribe almost lost their chance to get rid of the disease that caused so many of their tribesmen to die? The boy shouted, Yes, he would never believe that 3 strangers could rid them of this strange disease. Then the chief said to the men, Seize him and put him in the dungeon. The boys all rushed to grab him. Ling He walked over to the little girl, stroked her head and said, Thanks to the courage of little Tien, who was the very first to test the medicine, they were able to quickly resolve the misunderstanding. But little Tien no longer acts so recklessly, otherwise her brother will be very worried. The girl replied that her brother believes her sister. So she believed too, and she also wanted to get well soon so that her brother would be happier. Chief Bai approached Lina and explained that it was entirely her fault. She apologized as chief. She almost got her in trouble because of her. Thank you for taking on the task of preparing a cure for their tribe. Lina said you shouldn't thank her. In fact, it was partly because of her selfish desire. She had heard from Man Chi that that waterfall was your sacred spring, and she hoped that for that, they would let them draw water from it. Jialan suddenly ran up to Lina. The guy grabbed her hand, saying, Lina, he'll think of other ways to negotiate with them. You don't have to bother. But Lin pulled her hand out and said, What's wrong? My Li is my tribe. Also what's wrong is that I want to help my tribe. Jialan was very surprised at her decision. He said that he just wanted to help so much. Of all of them, only Man Chi heard the right words for him. So Linnea just said that Mai Lia was her tribe. So she agrees to become his woman and make Mai Li her home.
Baiquan smiled and said that in that case, as the chief of the Isika tribe, she would promise them. The girl also added that as long as she leads the tribe, then the Malia tribe will be given the opportunity to draw water from the sacred spring. Lin was very happy about this. But then suddenly the chief thought for a moment and said that she didn't really think it would be enough. After all, they had rid their tribe of this strange and incomprehensible disease. Then she turned to the girl and asked if, as a token of her gratitude, she should give her some of their males, the best ones, of course. When Lin heard this, she was startled. She hadn't expected that the chieftain could offer her such a thing. However, Baiquan turned to the side, pointing at the men, and told her to take a closer look at them, after all. Maybe she would like someone after all. After that, she ran up to the guy named Manika and said that she might even choose him even though he was a bit young. However, he had a lot of potential and would become much stronger in the future than he was now. The guy was a little surprised, but he looked it over and said that of course it would get even better over time. Yi, Jialan, and Yu Ye, when they heard this, were very indignant. They turned to the girl asking if she would really allow all this. Yi Lin was in a quandary at this point. She thought about the fact that if she were offered to take some antelopes so that she could feed and breed them later, she would certainly not even hesitate to accept it. But they're beastmen, not real antelopes, so she still has some doubts about it. Then the guys suddenly started to divide her amongst themselves. Jialan held her on one side of his arm and said that she was actually his woman, while Yue held her other arm and told him to let go. Did he really want to die since he was so insistent? Jialan then smiled happily and said that the girl could even touch his fluffy ears. He wouldn't mind. Then suddenly, the other men who were standing nearby with bare torsos suddenly spoke up and asked for her to choose them. In fact, Lin, even the mere thought of it gave her an entire headache. So she decided that the best solution for her would be to just forget about everything. So the girl thanked the chief for her generous offer, and said that although Manichi and the other men of their tribe were very good, but she certainly didn't need them right now. When her companions heard this, they were immediately overjoyed that the girl had rejected after all. In fact, they knew it would happen. But it was better to be safe than sorry. Bai Quan hugged the guy who was standing next to her and said that since that was the case, she didn't want it. The girl wouldn't force her. And after that, the chief also added that in just a few days, the day of the annual duels between the males would be coming up. It will be quite spectacular and a lot of fun, so she really hopes Lin will stay and watch it. When the girl heard this, she asked what kind of jousting was going on between the males. Lin Yi, who was the assistant chief, entered the conversation and said that in fact, every summer, their males compete with each other, and the winner gets the right to choose a female, and the rest are chosen by the women themselves. The girl also cheerfully said that when little Tian grew up, she too would choose a male during the duels. Lin thought about their proposal for a while, and after that, she turned to Jialan and said that it sounded very funny, so she really wanted to stay and watch it. The girl herself at this point thought about how in her world, male antelopes actually fought over females too, and she had always wanted to watch it happen, but never had the time. The man thought for a while, but after that he smiled gently at the girl and said that so be it. He would agree to stay in this place for a few more days, since she wanted to see this sight so much. Lin, hearing this, was very happy, and after that they left that place to rest for a while. At this very time, she suddenly entered the dungeon. She knocked on the stone door and told her to open the door. Of course no one would disobey her order, so the girl soon entered the man who was sitting in the middle of the dungeon all alone. But when he saw who came in to see him, he immediately cheered up, and he was indeed very glad to see the assistant chief. The girl in turn moved closer to him and stroked his cheek, telling Du Lun that he need not worry, for she would surely get him out of this horrible place. But the boy suddenly hesitated and said that the guest had ordered him to be put here for a very long time. But the girl became very resolute and said that even though Bai Quan was the chief, she was still her aunt, so the woman should at least take her word for it. Besides, she also added that those outsiders would leave sooner or later, so don't worry about it so much. She moved closer to the man and said that the fights would begin in a few days. She also told Du Lun that he should try his best and become a winner. Then no one would have any doubt that he was a man who was worthy. Her boyfriend immediately smiled and said that he would definitely try his best to live up to her high expectations. Lin Ai reached for his lips so that they joined in a tender and passionate kiss, while saying at the same time that she would definitely help him win, and in that regard, he could not worry. The guy kissed her back and said that she was very kind to him. And after some time of silence, he even said that he loved her. Then they had what the guy and girl had been waiting for so long, and Lin Ai said at the end that of course she was kind, and in no way was she going to forgive those who had done such a terrible thing to him. 2 more days had passed since that day, and there were a great many men gathered near the novena, who were in a fighting mood before the competition. When Lin arrived at the event, she looked around. In fact, she was surprised at how many people had come, and it was indeed very lively, something she wasn't used to. Some guys who were standing around and saw the stranger immediately started whispering. One of them asked, "Is this really the woman who saved their tribe from the strange disease?" His friend nodded and said that she was very even beautiful. That one agreed with him. Also, Gus said that it would be really great if she participated too. He would definitely do his best to make sure she ended up choosing him. The guys who were accompanying Lin heard all this talk and sighed heavily, thinking that the girl in this place was very even popular. This of course annoyed them and made them jealous. Yue agreed with him and said that they were just a bunch of weaklings and they weren't even worthy of looking at the girl, let alone dreaming about her. At that moment, a little girl suddenly ran up to Lin. She had a very beautiful rose flower in her hands. She ran up and said that she had brought it especially for her. The girl bent down and accepted the gift. She thanked little Tien and said that it was an incredibly beautiful flower. The girl smiled back at her and said she was insanely glad she liked it after all. But at that moment, a man interrupted their conversation. It was the announcer. He said that he welcomed everyone to the annual male bouts, and they would be starting soon. He held just the same flower that Lin had just given to the girl, and said that the women who had received the desert roses should take seats on the special viewing platform. He also added that the best places have been specially prepared for them so that they can watch the bouts up close and choose the one they like the most. And when Lin heard all this, she was furious. She didn't understand how it happened because she wasn't even going to choose anyone. And then she realized that it was little Tian who had given her the flower. The girl turned to her and said that there was no way she could accept it, but Tian smiled and said that she had already taken it and could not take it back. So she would have to choose one of the contestants and give her flower to him. She also said that only one of the 3 best males would be eligible to take him. Then she took the girl's hand and started pulling her to the side, telling her to come with us to the observation deck, because she couldn't wait to choose a better male for Lin. Ui, seeing the whole picture, was indignant. He said that he was always on guard, but he never thought that his defenses would crack because of this little girl. Jialan was also furious. He didn't understand how he could have even overlooked this little girl. After all, she wasn't that inconspicuous. Tian soon brought the girl to the others and sat her down on a rock, telling her to sit down quickly, for her brother would soon be on the platform. The girl also said that even though her brother wasn't that old, but he was still quite strong and a decent fighter. Lin was very embarrassed at this moment, because she didn't want all of this. The chief, who was sitting next to the girl, smiled evilly, and said that had Lin changed her mind after all, and decided to bring a few of their males into her tribe. Without waiting for her reply, she looked somewhere to the side, and said that she would advise her to take a closer look at Chi-Chi and Meng. After all, with their professional martial training, they would be among the top 3 very soon. Lin was very worried. However, she thanked the girl for her concern and said that she really wasn't going to take anyone with her, because she just didn't need to. Then the girl decided to inquire a few things. She went to the chief and said that little Diana had told her that this flower was to be given to one of the top 3, but there were a lot of flower girls in this place, and she wondered if that meant that they were all meant for someone in the top 3. Bai Quan said that everything was correct, and the male who got the most flowers would have the right to choose the female on his own. The chief also smiled and added that he would have to choose one of the girls who had given him the flower. And after that, she would already be his lawful wedded wife. Lin, hearing this, was very happy, for it meant that if the guy she gave this flower to didn't choose her, everything would be fine and she wouldn't need marriage. At this very time, Yue and Jialan surrounded the poor organizer. Seeing their menacing faces, he asked what it was they wanted. Jialan then seriously said that he really wanted to participate in these fights. He thought to himself that since he and Lin loved each other, he would be enough for her. Yue also spoke up and said that of course they wouldn't be very interested in fighting some weaklings, and so he was also in. And at this moment, the guy himself thought that Lin already had one weakling, Jialan, and he wouldn't bitch about the second one. The organizer was in a quandary. He said that the participants had already been divided into pairs and they could not add new ones. However, at this moment, Lin Ai approached them and said that they could participate as well. You go ahead. I too are the honored guests, and since they want to learn the customs of their tribe, they will make an exception for them. The boys looked at her with disdain and didn't understand why the female had stood up for them. It even made the men a little uneasy. Lin A continued speaking at this moment and said that she knew how strong they were. Then she would like to add a few more conditions in such a case. The girl smiled and said that if they wanted to fight after that, they would do so blindfolded, and they would also be forbidden to turn into beasts. Then she asked if they would agree to such conditions. Now the exercise made everything clearer. They realized why they had been feeling as if they were being lured into some kind of trap all along. But after thinking for a bit, they unanimously said that of course, they agreed. UIA also added that he wouldn't take the form of a beast against the weaklings anyway. After all, he wasn't a savage and could spare those poor people. Lin A knew that of course they would agree. Then she turned to the administrator and said that since they had given the go-ahead, they needed to change the order of the fights a bit. The girl said that they should let them taste their own blood. The man had already distanced himself enough at this point, and then she said for the guy to remember. Win Dulun is sure to defeat everyone easily. The man smiled and told the lady that she didn't have to worry, for he would definitely arrange everything as it should be. From that moment some more time passed, and the man came out to the others and said that all the contestants were ready. So it was time for the annual bouts to begin, so he invited the first couple to the stage for this confrontation, and the first to participate in the competition were Chi-Chi and Jialan. The second one was blindfolded, as promised, but in a rather combative mood. The girl was very surprised when she saw him. She didn't expect him to participate, but what surprised her even more was that he had his eyes closed for some reason. Lin also looked at his opponent and realized that he looked quite strong. Therefore, she assumed that it would most likely be hard for Jia-lan to defeat him. But soon, the organizer said that they could start, and the people who were watching all this happily started shouting out the various names of those they were cheering for. Jia-lan was very angry at this moment, for it was too noisy, and he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to hear his opponent's footsteps because of all the rumbling. Cheeky at this moment had already transformed into his animal. It was a deer with incredibly long antlers, and the man at this moment thought that this was a very good chance for him. And also, he laughed, and thought that Jia-lan was definitely unlucky to have an opponent. When Lin saw that the deer was starting to get too close, she shouted with all her might to the guy and told him to be careful, because the one was already very close. Jia-lan heard her warning just in time, and when he would have listened more closely, it was to hear that the deer had run too close to him. Then the man grabbed it by the horns. He put in quite a bit of effort, but he still managed to saddle the deer, even with his eyes closed. Jia-lan turned to his opponent at this moment and said that it was all Lin, and he apologized very much if he had hurt him. At the end, he even turned into a lion for a few seconds. But Chi-Chi, seeing his terrified face, immediately shouted, saying that he was giving up and didn't want to fight him anymore. Then the organizer walked up to Jia-lan and took his hand and lifted it up, saying that the fight was over and Chi-Chi had surrendered. So it is Jia-lan who is the winner. The man at this moment began to remove his blindfold and looked at Lin carefully. He thought that she should just wait for him, for he would definitely win the first place, and she would become his lawful wife. The girl who had been watching intently could finally exhale with relief, for she had been scared to death. But fortunately he was unharmed, so she is calm. Lin also thought about the fact that this duel was really exciting, and she had already thought that Jia-lan would lose. However, he showed all his strength and courage, and did not let himself be defeated. Then the organizer spoke again, and said that the next pair of opponents would be Meng and one special guest, Yue. He wished all the spectators a good spectacle, and the warriors good luck and strength. When they entered the arena, Lin was simply furious. She didn't understand why the guy had even agreed to all this. But at this moment, her musings were suddenly interrupted by the chieftain. She leaned closer to the girl and whispered that she had just been told that Jia-lan's eye patch was her assistant's condition for participating in the fights. Bai Quan also added that Yue's condition was a ban on the use of the vision form, and he could only fight in the guise of an ordinary person. The girl looked at Lin and asked her whether she thought the man would be up to the task. Lin became even more anxious upon hearing this condition. She couldn't imagine what it would be like to fight a human against a real beast, and she was even scared at the thought that Yu might somehow get hurt at all. At that moment, the opponents, who were warming up their muscles before the fight, began to talk. Meng turned to his opponent and said that he had been told that he was forbidden to take the form of a beast. So he apologized in advance for his injuries. Yue didn't even have time to reply anything because the guy immediately rushed into the fight, raising his fist up and declaring that he was starting first. But at this moment, when his fist should have collided with the guy's face, it didn't happen. Yue managed to masterfully dodge his punch and didn't even hit a hair. Then he looked at his opponent carefully and asked with a sneer what kind of childish fun this was. He was fed up with all this and wanted a fair and brutal fight. As Meng was about to strike again, before he knew it, he was hit in the face with a kick. The blow was so strong that one of his teeth chipped off, and even his mouth began to bleed. The guy couldn't even stay on his feet because of this, and fell to the ground with tremendous force. Yue walked up to his opponent and just stared at him silently. Indeed, the guy didn't even have to transform into a beast to defeat him. He did it with just one leg. When the girls saw this, they were delighted, and especially the chief and Lin. They were very happy that the boy was not hurt, and on the contrary, he was even able to put his opponent down. However, Meng did not lie down for too long. After a while, he had already gotten to his feet and was ready for another fight. But then suddenly Yue, who was at a distance from him, spoke up. The guy said that he was too weak to fight alongside him on the same platform. Then he smiled and said that this was why he wouldn't beat him anymore, and also surrendered himself if Meng could still get his hands on him even once. His opponent started wiping the blood from his mouth that was pouring out due to the heavy blow, and sent him far away, saying he would wipe his cocky and stupid grin off his face. At this moment, the man turned into his beast and roared loudly, and then ran straight into the attack with a sharp and wild dash. Yue at this moment was absolutely calmly standing there and just watching, and when he saw the monster approaching, he just managed to jump back from its strike, and that was it. The guy also laughed and said that he was very weak, and he needed to admit it. And just because he thought he was strong didn't make him so, and that fact would only give him more wounds. But Meng Meng was too proud to admit that his opponent's blows had confused him a bit, and he angrily shouted, telling him to shut up already, for he was the one who was a weakling, and everyone in his tribe was. After that, he went to attack him again. However, Ui was fed up with all of this, and was able to jump over his body even over the top. Thus, the guy didn't manage to reach him after all. Meng Meng, who had accelerated a little too much, didn't see the end of the scene and collapsed straight down with all his might. It was very loud and spectacular. After that, Yue disdainfully looked at his opponent who was still lying on the ground and said that he was too noisy and boring. If he had originally acknowledged his pride instead of making a fool of himself, perhaps the guy would have felt sorry for him. Then suddenly, angered shouts from the crowd were heard. One of the men said that Yue was a bastard, and many people wanted to avenge their friend by saying that they would destroy him and trample him down. Yue wasn't even surprised by this. He only smirked and said that only weaklings could bunch up to fight against someone alone. He looked carefully at the men who were approaching him and said that with all his respect for their tribe, everyone in this place was a weakling who was incapable of defeating him in any way. Lin, watching all this, became very angry. She thought that the guy should shut up, because she was afraid that all the warriors present would attack him as soon as he got off the stage. But at this moment, her musings were suddenly interrupted by someone's resounding laughter. It was Bai Quan. She said that she didn't even think that Yui could be such a funny young man. Lin in turn looked at him in surprise, and didn't understand what was so funny about him taking everyone and humiliating them. In fact, she did not understand the chief's preferences. They are too exotic for a girl. And at this moment, the organizer came on stage again, and laughed nervously, and said that Yue. Then he looked at the other candidates and said that they all looked very excited, but they shouldn't be in a hurry to waste all their energy, because there were still a lot of interesting things in front of them. At that time, the man was about to name the next opponents. At this moment, Man Chi sat as far away from all these activities as possible and plucked a flower that was growing near him. He began to slowly tear off one petal from it at a time, and thus guessed whether he would win in this contest or not. But at that moment, his little sister suddenly came running to him and told his brother that she had found out who he was going to fight. Then she added that his opponent would be Dulong. When the guy heard this, he was very surprised. He said that even though Dulun was not as huge as Meng Meng or Chi Chi, his horns were very sharp, and he had even seen him pierce a cheetah with them once. Man Chi suddenly became very anxious and said that he would definitely have a hard time with him. Tian looked at him in surprise at this moment and asked what should they do. After all, Lin would only be able to choose her brother if he defeated Dulun in this competition. Then she asked him if maybe he should ask brother Jialan to fight quickly. But at that moment, the guy was so angry that he even threw a stone with all his might into the water. He also told his sister that he and he were rivals, so he didn't think he would help him in any way. But Tian smiled and said that they wouldn't know until they tried it. Especially Jialan seemed like a very nice guy to her. There was nothing else to do but agree to it. Soon they returned, and Man Chi immediately approached the man, saying that he had something to ask him. The man was very surprised and asked him what he wanted to ask him. The boy was a little embarrassed, and then he wanted to say something, but he was still afraid. And at that moment his younger sister, who continued to hold his hand, spoke. Tian looked at the man with a pitiful look and said that Big Brother would have to fight a rather strong opponent, so he would like to ask him to teach him various techniques to win this competition. She was glowing from her cuteness and smiled and turned to Big Brother Jialan, asking if he would help him. At that moment, the man in her place pictured a little girl with beautiful little ears who addresses him as Daddy and asks if he will help him. Of course, after that, the man didn't resist anymore. He sighed heavily and said that he would help them. In fact, Jialan at this moment thought that if his own daughter looked at him with such a look, he would even give his life for her. And at this moment, he began to imagine what kind of little lion cubs he and Lin would make. Then the man looked at the guy contemptuously and said that it was actually impossible to become strong drastically in such a short time. However, he could learn to use the strength he had now, and he also asked how the guy thought what his current strengths were. Man Chi waved his hand at this moment, and the stones that were behind him immediately shattered, and he smilingly asked if maybe his strength was strength. However, the man shook his head and said that was definitely not the case. Man Chi thought for a while about what else he could think of. Then he gave his little sister a stick and asked her to poke at him. The girl immediately began to do so, and he dodged skillfully, and with a smile on his face, asked the man if it might be speed after all. Jialan still insisted and said that it was not at all. He then pointed his finger at his head and said that it was all his weaknesses, but not his strength. The boy at that moment could not stand it and could not contain his emotions. He began to scream, said that he himself was a weakling, and he directly wanted to tear the man to shreds. At the same moment, Na Tian couldn't calm him down and asked him to stop and try to listen to Lan first. He had to calm down. And then they were silent for a while. Jialan said that his race of lions actually had one terrible tradition. When some wandering lion kills a king, he is sure to kill all the children of that very king. When the man began to tell the story of how a lion cub once lived and one of these wandering lions showed up on his doorstep, he was ruthless and killed the father, brothers, and even sisters of this little lion cub. And after all, it was soon his turn. But the boy, of course, did not want to die, for his life had only recently begun. He was still very young. The guy, flooding with tears, said at that moment that he was very afraid of pain, and asked that this ruthless lion finish everything with one blow. He pointed to his chest, and asked that he hit him right there, so that it would be over very quickly, and he would not feel any pain. The lion cub was well aware that he could not cope with this huge lion now, so he decided to fully expose his weakness. At that moment, this terrible bloodthirsty lion grabbed his face and lifted him up. The huge and ruthless animal began to scream, saying that this kitten is very weak and fearful, and wondered if he really wants to die quickly. But he refuses this offer, because before he dies, he will feel his weakness with his whole body. The boy must realize that in this world, the weak die only at the hands of the strong. And in the end, as expected, the enemy was unwilling to show mercy. However, sensing the weakness of the little lion cub, the wandering lion let his guard down for a while. It was only because the lion cub was able to skillfully exploit his weaknesses and activate his strengths that he was able to defeat an opponent who outclassed him in every way. He attacked first, and was able to save his own skin. Man Chi, upon hearing this story, was delighted. He listened attentively to every word, and when it was over, he said that it was incredibly cool. Jialan said that was why he should realize that his weaknesses didn't always remain weaknesses. It just depends on how he uses them. The man said in a serious voice that he should also think hard about it, and then perhaps he could unexpectedly turn the tide of the battle in his favor. The boy, hearing this, got very excited. He took his sister in his arms and ran in the other direction, saying that he understood everything and would start right away. At this point, the man wondered if he was sure he had understood him correctly, but then suddenly he was distracted. It was Lin who approached the man and turned to him. She tearfully asked him if the lion cub he had just told him about was really him. Jialan smiled at this moment and said that there was definitely nothing to hide from her. Then he confirmed this information and added that unfortunately, it was indeed his share. Lin moved closer to him and ran her fingers along his cheek, and said that he must have been incredibly badly frightened and all alone back then. The girl, in fact, of course, knew that this was a common phenomenon among lions, but she had never imagined that the man had also faced it. She was absolutely certain that the death of his entire family had left a deep wound in him for the rest of his life. Jialan put her hand closer to his cheek and said that yes, that was all there was, but it didn't matter now. It had happened many years ago. Then he had already met Miley's former chief, and he had picked him up. Jialan explained that the former chief was as strong as he was merciful. He created the Miley tribe by uniting all those who had lost their homes. That was why there was such a diversity of races in their tribe. The girl realized everything at that moment. She remembered that, in fact, there were indeed a variety of beastmen living in Mil. For example, in this Isika tribe there are only antelopes and no one else. Jialan put her hand to his chest and said that he really hoped that he could continue the former chief's work. He would continue to try his best for the good of their tribe and help those in need. Lin cheered him up and smiled and said that she was absolutely sure that he would definitely succeed. From that moment, some more time passed, and the organizer once again came on stage, saying that their youngest participant in the tournament had finally arrived, and young man Chi's opponent would be Dulun. The men went to the stage, and Lin turned around and said that apparently it was finally his turn, and Man Ki, she even wondered if he had been able to learn anything from the guy. Then she took Jialan by the hand and began to lead him that way, telling them to watch his duel together. The man who was walking behind was very surprised, for Lin had become cheerful very suddenly for him. He assumed that she had probably somehow sensed that it was painful enough for him to remember his past, so she was now trying to distract him from those thoughts. That amused him greatly, and he smiled, thinking that she was incredibly thoughtful. Maybe he should even show her his weaknesses more often, so that they could grow closer. Yue, who was already in the tournament grounds, was surprised to see this sweet couple, and didn't understand why Lin was suddenly walking in the arms of this cat. It was still a mystery to him when they managed to get along well like this. But the man was serious. He frowned suddenly, thinking that he wasn't going to just stand by and watch all of this. He had to act. But when the man was about to approach him, the chief blocked his way and said firmly that she wanted to fight him too. Bai Quan looked very serious and said that he was certainly very strong. However, she wasn't weak either, so she suggested that he go into the ring and fight against each other. Yue, seeing her, wondered if she was purposely disturbing him right now, and it really annoyed him. The man sighed heavily and thought that weaklings were so stupid that they couldn't even listen to the instinct of self-preservation. And if he'd known it was going to be like this, he'd have just knocked her to the ground and moved on. At this moment in the ring, the fighters had already prepared themselves. The people who were watching all this began to support their candidates. Of course, the majority were cheering for Dulun. Manchi, who was originally in a fighting mood upon seeing his vicious opponent, began to tremble in fear. He didn't expect it to be this brutal. Lin, who was sitting on one of the rocks watching all this, looked at her flower and thought about the fact that a little bit of it was still waiting for her, that she hadn't been able to knock those two out. However, this time, everything would go perfectly. She was so confident in the man's victory after all. She had picked the weakest of their trio especially for him. So she really hoped that Dulun wouldn't let her down. Then the little guy immediately went on the attack. Dulun dodged his punch and turned to him and said that he was too short to fight with him like this, and there was no way he would be able to defeat him like this. Manchi swung around to deliver another blow that the warrior would masterfully dodge, and said that he was absolutely certain that he would reach him that way sooner or later. Then the guy punched him right in the abs with his fist. However, it was all useless, because his opponent was strong enough to survive the blow. He only laughed. After that, he kicked him with his stomach, so that poor Manchi was thrown back a few meters. Dulun looked at him proudly, and then asked if he really saw the truth that his blows were neither hot nor cold. Manchi fell to the floor at this moment and started screaming loudly, pretending that he was in incredible pain and couldn't even do anything. The guy then suddenly became alarmed and turned to him and asked if he was okay, because he hadn't even put much force into the punch, and he didn't understand why he was hurting so much in such a case. Manchi himself smiled happily at this moment, for he had succeeded in doing what he had intended after all. And in that very second, he transformed into his animal, and while his opponent lost his guard, he immediately went on the offensive against him. Dulun immediately started to move further away from him, because according to the Nepalese, those horns were sharp enough to pierce his stomach. However, he soon moved away so much that he found himself on the edge of the stage and almost fell. Lin, who was watching all this, began to encourage the younger father, saying that he had one last punch left, and the boy was a little upset at this point, because he couldn't even push him off the platform that way. But when he heard that his sister Lin was supporting him, he was obliged to just win, so he transformed into an animal once again and ran straight at his opponent. But at that moment, something strange happened. A stone suddenly hit him in the leg. It was so hard that he couldn't even stay on his feet and just fell down. The people who were watching were very surprised, especially Lin. She even got to her feet out of worry and shouted his name. The girl didn't understand why he suddenly fell down. Jia Lan, who was sitting next to her, didn't understand what had happened either. And then, after taking a closer look, he said that he thought he saw something flash near the guy's feet. And then he just took it and just fell to the ground for no reason. The girl was even more frightened when she heard this. She said she didn't even notice it at all, and neither did the rest of the audience. But she knew that Jia Lan could definitely be trusted. Besides, his eyesight, like all other lions, was much better than that of ordinary humans or other wild animals. They are able to see fast objects even at a decent distance. Dulun at this moment stepped back from the edge of the arena and pointed his hand at the guy, asking how he even dared to deceive him. Manchi was very frightened when he heard this, but at that moment, his opponent also transformed into an animal and attacked him, saying that he would pay for the foolishness he had done. The boy, defending himself, replied that in war all means are good, and that he was a fool not to realize it. But his adversary at that moment struck his body with his horns so hard that he flew far away. The people who were watching all of this sighed heavily, and thought that he was definitely unlucky to have an opponent. But at this moment, the organizer entered the arena and took the winner's hand and raised it up, saying that Dulun had won this fight. Manchi, who had flown off stage, lay on the floor with tears in his eyes and pain all over his body due to the blow, and thought about the fact that he had lost after all. He was very sorry, because now he definitely wouldn't be able to marry Sister Lin. At this moment, people started running up to him, and his younger sister was the most worried. This was also the case with the chief, Lin herself, and Jialan. But the guy, when he saw them, immediately got up from the ground and started running away. He apologized, saying that he needed to be alone. Bai Quan said at this point that he probably needed some time to grieve alone. She was sorry that the competition was already over for him, because he was a worthy fighter. The girl sighed heavily and said that if he hadn't stumbled back then, he probably would have defeated even a strong fighter like his opponent. Jialan, for his part, said that if one were to talk about it, it seemed to him that Dulun had been helped by someone outside the arena. When the girl heard this, she was very surprised and asked, "Does he really think that?" But at that moment, Lin also intervened in the conversation. She said in a stern but confident voice that they didn't have any evidence for it yet. Not to mention the essential "so what" should not be publicized. She also said that Man Chi was their friend, and she didn't want to just sit idly by. So they should definitely find out the truth about what happened in that arena. The chief at that moment became very angry. She said that if this was really true, the offender should be punished very severely in such a case. But she also added that if she speaks out right now without any evidence, it will only scare the offender away. So she wants to ask them to be the ones to sort it all out. Bai Quan also said that if they suddenly needed her help or support, they could just say so, and she would definitely do her best. The man hesitated at this point, and afterwards, he said that he could probably really use her help. Jialan said that he had already had time to look at the approaches to the platform. However, he didn't find anything suspicious, and perhaps the thing that knocked the guy down was still lying there on the stage. The chief, hearing this, said that now everything was clear to her. Then she asked them to follow her. They returned to the arena, where the organizer had already said they were continuing, and was about to name the next pair to duel. However, he didn't have time to do so, for Bai Quan had already approached him and shouted loudly, asking him to wait. A guy and a girl followed her. They stopped, and Bai Quan said that this competition was especially good, and it was a pleasure to watch from the sidelines. But she was having so much fun that she wanted to climb up on the platform to sing to the audience. When the people heard this, they immediately got excited, especially the man. They loved her very much and started shouting her name, saying that they really wanted to hear her sing. After all, they are sure that it is just an incredible sight. At this moment, the girl turned to her guests and smirked. Then Lin, realizing everything, nodded back at her. The leader then entered the arena and began to hum an incredibly beautiful emotional song with quite profound lyrics. The men, when they heard her incredibly gentle and enchanting voice, immediately began to shout enthusiastically and support their leader. At this moment, the guy and girl stood behind and began to search the arena in search of what had caused Man Qi to stumble after all. It had been quite some time, but they could not find what had prevented him from winning. But soon Lin saw small shards of stone on the ground. Then the girl immediately took it in her hands and picked it up. She began to examine it carefully, studying the structure of the stone. And looking closer, Lin noticed that it was moistened sand that had been tightly compressed into small lumps to sabotage the competition. However, at that moment, one of the spectators saw that something was going on behind them. He immediately started shouting, pointing his hands at the guy and the girl, asking what they had forgotten and were doing there. The chief immediately panicked, for she was betraying the trust of her people. The girl did not know what to say to them, what excuse to make. But at this moment, Lin got to her feet and said with a smile that they had decided to dance to the chieftain's magnificent singing here. It was simply impossible to hold back these feelings, so they started moving. Jialan also began to move his hips and said that that was right. They were just a backup dancer and weren't doing anything like that. From that moment, some more time passed, and the chief finally finished singing, and the young men bowed to all the guests as they left the stage, glad that they had been able to pull it all off discreetly after all. When they came down from the stage, Bai Quan immediately turned to them and asked how everything had gone there, and if there had been any progress. Had they found anything? Lin at this moment opened her hand and showed a small remnant of a pebble. She said that she had found it on the platform. Maybe seeing that really surprised me. If asked, is it really sand? But she did not understand what was so strange about the fact that it was the one that hit the platform. After all, it was always windy in this place, and it was not surprising that it had just been blown in. However, Lin at this moment brought her hands to their noses, herself asking them to sniff. The boy immediately did so, and then said in a surprised voice that indeed, the sand smelled something unusual. The chief also sniffed carefully. Then she said that it smelled like a desert rose. Lin, hearing this, took out her flower and said that it was exactly that, exactly the fragrance of the desert rose. The girl said she thought the intruder used the desert rose juice to moisten and crumple the sand, ending up with very even hard little balls. Lin hesitated for a moment. And after that, she said that Manchi was running at a tremendous speed, so it was easier to knock him down, and throwing a small ball was enough for him to lose his chance and just lose. The chief, when she heard all that, she thought about it. And then she said, "They have found out how it all happened." Jialan stroked the girl's head at this moment and smiled, and said that she was an incredibly smart girl. She giggled back at him. She was pleased that he was paying her such compliments. Bai Quan said thoughtfully at this point, "On this day, almost every female had a desert rose, and the males could have picked its petals from somewhere to do this deed. But the man protested and said that the intruder could not have been a male." The girls looked at him in surprise, not understanding why he was so sure. Jialan then explained that this was, after all, a competition for the love of females, and no male in his right mind would purposely knock out Manchi and leave Dulun to his opponent, who was clearly stronger than that guy. The chief at this point thought for a moment, and then chuckled and said that, yes, indeed, guys do understand other guys better. And there was logic in what he said. Lin agreed with her and said that since that was the case, the intruder was a woman, in which case the case would become even simpler. The girl also said that there weren't many girls in the Isaac tribe, so they could just gather everyone in one place and sniff their hands. And at that moment, Lin took Jialan's hand and brought it closer to her face to sniff it and smell that odor. The man, watching all of this, was very surprised. However, at that moment, his heart began to beat even harder, and he was even sweating with nerves. Then the chief rejoiced, saying that it would be the easiest thing to do, and she would take care of the matter. But in fact, the boys were not alone. They just didn't see that Lin Ai was standing not far away from them, listening intently to their conversation. The girl frowned very much, for she realized that they might be talking just about her. And this alarmed her, for the girl might very easily give out. After that, the chief, as promised, gathered all the girls in one place, and even little Tien. The girls immediately began to give her many compliments, and said that she sang incredibly beautifully, and that she had a beautiful voice. Bai Quan laughed and thanked them for such compliments, then said that she so assumed that they were all girls who were ready for marriage. One of the candidates smiled and said that's right, that's where everyone except the assistant chief was gathered. Bai Quan said that was good. Now she asked them to do what she asked them to do, stretch out their hands with palms up. The girls were a little confused as to what this was for, but agreed in the form of what the leader was asking them to do. When the girl turned to little Tiana and said that the rest was up to her, the girl began to be brought up to the hands of the various candidates, and she sniffed them carefully. Lin A, who had been standing aside so that no one would notice her, was very surprised when she saw this. She didn't understand what they were doing there, and most importantly, why. The girl realized at that moment that they had probably guessed something, then sniffed her hands, which gave off a strong smell of desert rose juice. Lin Ai couldn't believe that they had somehow managed to guess that she had helped Dulun a little, and then tried to calm herself down by telling herself that no one could have noticed it. Then she turned around about to leave, because just in case she needed to wash off that terrible odor that could give her away at any moment. But suddenly, Lin came up to her and addressed the assistant chief. The girl wondered where she was going already, since her hands hadn't been checked yet. Soon their deception was discovered, and the authorities took them inside the cave of the Isika tribe to speak to the intruders. Lin Ai, along with her lover, were kneeling in front of the chief, and the woman was incredibly angry with them. Bai Quan, shouting out every word, asked how they even dared to cheat in duels, and wondered if they realized how serious a transgression it was. The chief explained that male duels are a special ritual for choosing a mate for marriage, and the future of their tribe depends on it. The girl also said that for the transgression they had committed, she might well expel them from the tribe. When the man heard this, he did not tolerate it any longer, and began to decide, asking how it was possible at all. He then decided to defend himself, saying that he thought that Manchi had stumbled back then himself, and there was no way he could know for sure that her assistant had done it. He almost cried, saying that he had never even thought of asking her to help him in any way during the fights. He kept saying it was certainly not his fault, but at this moment, Manchi spoke. He pointed his finger furiously at the guy and asked if it was really the assistant chief who had helped him, and that was why he had lost, even though he had every chance of winning this competition. He also said that without this girl's help, the lad would certainly not have won. Then the chief spoke. She smiled and asked if he really thought he was so innocent. Bai Quan then asked if that meant that he was claiming that it was all the girl's fault. The man whimpered and asked what was the big deal, because it was all true, it was all her fault, and she was the only one who clearly liked him, and the assistant chief only wanted him to win and get her. The boy could not contain his emotions any longer. He even cried, saying that he was not guilty of anything, and also told the chief that she could not take him, so innocent, and banish him. Lin A, who was sitting next to him, couldn't stand his whining anymore. She was very angry and shouted and asked him to shut up at last. The girl was ready to pounce on him and said that she really wanted him to take first place and be hers. However, it had nothing to do with the fact that she supposedly liked him. Lin Ai tore the ropes with which her hands were bound and slapped him on the cheek, saying that she would simply gain more influence if the winner of the duel was beside her. She grabbed him by the jewelry that was on his head and asked him why he shouldn't tell the truth and keep at least some of his dignity. The girl also said that if he hadn't gotten into bed with her himself, there was no way she would have even considered making him hers. Lin, who was observing all this, said that Dulun's conceit could only be envied. He decided that the assistant chief was unable to resist his incomparable beauty. Jialan agreed with her and said that it ended up that he himself had started courting her just to get closer to the post of assistant chief. Bai Quan confidently turned to the criminals at this moment and asked if this meant that they would confess to what they had done. Lin A got up from the floor and said that she would admit that she had helped this idiot, and what they had learned about it could no longer be changed. She said that if the chief wanted to expel her from the tribe, then so be it. The boy who continued to lie on the floor screamed, asking the chief to be lenient and forgive him. After all, he did not want to leave his own tribe. Bai Quan was actually very surprised. She hadn't expected her assistant to admit it so easily, but she had been helping her since she was a little girl. And besides, this girl was the only family member she had left at all. Then she said that since they were confessing, so be it. Then the girl stood up and asked the assistant to send word that Dulun and Lin Yi had been expelled from the Isek tribe and that they were no longer part of the tribe. The boy at this point continued to plead with the chief, but it was useless, and the girl only smiled and said that she had finally grown up. Lin A also said that she had been guided more by her feelings since childhood, and this was her main strength, but also her weakness at the same time. Then the chief suddenly became worried. She turned to her aunt and asked why she had done such a thing. Was it to teach her a terrible lesson? But the woman turned around and smiled and said that no one knew. Lin A suddenly stopped and said that she shouldn't think that she was so good, because she was the truest selfish person who wouldn't think of others first. She then began to walk away from the cave, leaving her niece all alone to deal with her feelings and worries. Lin, seeing all this, thought that the relationship between the chief and her assistant looked rather complicated, and it made her a little wary. However, at this moment, Bai Quan turned around and exhaled a sigh of relief, saying that they had finally sorted out the problem, and she thanked Lin as well as Jia Lan for the work they had done. The leader also said that she would soon tell everyone that Dulun had cheated and replace him with Manti. She told him that they could now go back to the venue and continue watching the duels and not worry about anything anymore. She thinks that no more similar incidents will happen. However, Lin was still very worried. She wasn't sure if everything was really all right with the chief. After all, she had just kicked out a native from the tribe, and it must be very hard. However, she pretends as if everything is fine, and as if nothing happened at all. When they were about to leave, the chief suddenly asked that Lin stay a little longer, for she wanted to talk to her. The chief looked very serious, and said there was something she wanted to discuss with her. The girl, seeing her stern expression, understood. Lin turned to the guy and told them to go ahead for now, and she would catch up with them after the conversation. Jialan agreed and they all walked out of the cave, leaving the girls alone. Then Lin looked the chief straight in the eye and inquired what had happened so much that she had to stay to talk. Bai Quan suddenly grabbed her hands and asked her in an angry voice if she even knew who Yue was. The girl, hearing this, was very frightened. She said that she didn't really know that his animal form was a python. Then the girl inquired of the chief why it was she who suddenly asked. Could it be that he was hiding something too? Bai Quan replied in a serious voice that she didn't want to interfere in their affairs, of course. However, she had already saved their tribe twice, so she felt it was her duty to tell her. Then the girl said that recently, Rumors had spread that the northern Linghong tribe was looking for someone, and if her information was to be believed, that person was Yu Ia. Lin, hearing this, was very surprised. She asked how it was possible, and also wondered if it was really one of the 4 major tribes, and she didn't understand why they were looking for him. It was even scary for the girl to imagine that Yu Ia might have done something bad, and that was the reason why everyone was looking for him. At that moment, the girl remembered the white woman's words. She had said that there were 4 main tribes in this world, which divided their spheres of influence among themselves, and if Yue is wanted by one of these tribes, it could mean that he has become the enemy of even an entire quarter of the world. Then suddenly the chief spoke again and said that Yu Ai was the only son of the chief of the northern Linghong tribe. The girl, when she heard this, sighed in surprise. And at that moment, she realized that the guy was not an enemy of the people, but was the heir of a quarter of the world, and of a noble family. Lin then said that if all of this was true, then she didn't understand why he had traveled to the Western Territory alone, for it was somehow illogical. The girl thought about the fact that such an important person should have some sort of escort, and he stooped to the point where she even had to help him with the molting. Chief said some even talk that he ran away from home to escape the marriage that was being forced on him. And she had also heard that his mother had introduced to him the 10 girls of the assistant chiefs by arranging a contest. And in the end, Yu Ia was to choose among them the 2 chief assistants who would lead their tribe forward. But since he didn't want all this, he just took off and ran away the night before the end of this competition. Bai Quan gave the girl a serious look and said that she really should be careful. After all, now all 10 girls are looking for him all over the world, and if any of them find out that there is such an attractive girl next to him, they will definitely want to just kill her to get rid of the so-called competitor. Lin, upon hearing this, became worried. However, she was not going to believe it. The girl told the chief that she had misunderstood everything. The view between her and Yu Ai had absolutely no relationship, and the guy only went after her because she helped him, and then decided that she was too weak and started defending her. Bai Quan didn't really believe her words. She thought about the fact that the girl was rather tight-lipped about such matters. And it's pretty cruel to ignore other people's feelings like that, because he shows them very well. Lin turned to Madame and asked if she could ask her for something, and then said that since Yu Ai didn't want to be found, could she also keep the fact that he was in this place a secret? The girl thought for a while, but after that, she agreed to this request. Of course, it would be quite a lucrative offer, because the northern Linghong tribe was paying generously for information about the guy. And the girl, if she found out that the information was true, her tribe would be provided with a year's supply of food. However, she realizes that in gratitude to Lin, she must pretend that he was never even here. Quite a few more hours have passed since then, and finally the bouts have come to an end, and it's time to summarize the results. There were 3 men standing in the arena. Jialan was in the first place, and the other 2 places were occupied by other worthy warriors. Unfortunately, Yu Ai's name was not among them. The girls, when they heard the results, immediately began to applaud, supporting the men, and the guy, who unfortunately did not make it to the final, stood and looked at them angrily, not understanding why it had happened at all. Yu Ai had actually lost, but he thought about the fact that if that guy he fought hadn't exhausted him more than usual, there was no way he would have lost in a fight with Jialan. Man Chi also lost, and when he found out, he was so upset that he couldn't even hold back his tears. He said that everything was lost, and he had missed his incredible chance. His little sister began to console him, telling him not to despair, for he was younger than they were, so he still had every chance for next year's victory. Then the organizer spoke, addressing the ladies, and said that they could already present their flowers to the 3 strongest warriors, and then it would only be left to wait for their decision. The girls started squealing and giving their flowers and declaring their love to the winners. They were actually very happy that it was these warriors who had won, and when it was finally Lin's turn to hand over her flower, Jialan held out his hand and, smiling, asked if she would give it to him. Everyone felt very uncomfortable about it, especially the girl herself. She didn't even know what to do. Then the chief nudged her to get the girl closer to the lad and told her not to delay any longer, but to choose sooner. However, the chief did not calculate her strength, and that is why Lin could not keep on her feet and began to fall straight into the arms of the man. He, of course, was overjoyed and pulled her closer to him. They were so close that they could even see the small freckles on Jialan's face. Then the girl quietly and stammeringly congratulated him on his victory. She was actually very worried, because they had never been so close to each other before. The man at that moment said that it was actually the best gift he had ever received in his life, and then their lips touched in a tender kiss. Lin was very embarrassed, for she realized that everyone present was now only looking at them, so she very quickly dismissed herself, saying that she remembered that she still had things to do and needed to leave. She was very uncomfortable with the whole situation, and she didn't know how she was going to go on with her life, much less face the people around her. When they were alone, they saw that someone had made them a whole path of those very rose petals, straight to a soft rock to sit on and more. Lin was very worried about it, but then she decided to clear things up, saying that it was just a reward for his first place, since he had worked so hard. Jialan was embarrassed, and the girl said that the local caves were very unusual, and they smelled different from everywhere else. The man agreed with her, averting his eyes, and said that he had heard that the rooms for the second and third places were also somewhere in the neighborhood. The girl pretended to be very surprised, but there was actually an awkward silence between them, and they both blushed. They were just two innocent people who didn't even know what to do in such a situation, because usually after winning, they should do intimate things. Jialan decided to take the initiative, so he grabbed the girl's palm, looked her in the eyes, and offered to sit down. Lin was very glad that this awkward silence was finally broken, and agreed to sit down, of course. Soon they went to the stone that had been prepared for them, and sat down on the very edge. After that they were silent again, for they had nothing to say to each other. After a while, Lin scrutinized the cave and noticed a drawing nearby. She immediately mentioned it and decided to take a closer look. But when she saw what was painted there, she immediately became embarrassed. A very explicit scene had been carved on the rock with a knife, and it even made the girl blush. Jialan, who was also interested in what could be carved there, leaned closer to the girl and asked her where it was. She was startled by how abruptly he did it and jumped up in surprise. Well, then she started to close his eyes and asked him not to look, because there was nothing expressed there. Nothing at all. She was just wrong. It was just mud, and she was saying it so fast you couldn't even make out the words. And at that moment, their awkward silence was suddenly interrupted by moans. It must have been the people from the neighboring room, the same winners. The girl began to sigh and said that from now on she was his female. Lin and the guy immediately blushed. It was too embarrassing for them, and the girl didn't understand what else this situation was, and why the atmosphere was even hotter. At this moment, Jialan began to stare intently into the girl's eyes, and she then thought about the fact that it turns out that they should do it too. Then her imagination completely ran wild and she began to imagine various scenes. The girl thought of them kissing, and him, like a true gentleman, asking if she wanted him to be her man for the evening. Lin, of course, agrees, and afterward he throws her on the bed, saying that he swears he will protect, love, and care for her for the rest of her life. The girl imagined all this in very vivid detail, and even she herself seemed to hear the voice of a man saying that she would be the only one needed, and no one else. They would live a happy life together. They move closer and closer to each other. He caresses her neck, then wonders if she wants to taste what's carved on those walls. Lin kept imagining and thinking about it in great detail for a while longer, and she even felt scared for herself, not realizing what was wrong with her and why she had started imagining it all, like some horny idiot. But at this moment, Jialan suddenly got up from his rock and said that he was thinking of something. The girl, who still couldn't get away from her fantasies, also pestered and nervously inquired what he was thinking about. The guy smiled at how worried she was and then said, putting his arm around her, that he thought they should stop there. It was enough for him that she blushed and measured power. It already meant that she perceived him as a true man. Jialan said that she didn't have to be afraid, because he wouldn't do anything against her will. Her gentle embrace would be enough for him. Placing his chin on her head, he said that he would wait until she accepted him with all her heart and soul. Then the boy leaned down to her ear and, stretching each word, said that only then would he be able to think about conceiving a little lion cub. Lin hugged him back and realized that he had really changed a lot.